You are.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. Where I've got an agenda here somewhere. Land acknowledgement, I'm guessing, is to start things off. Yeah. So I'd like to start this meeting by recognizing that the area that we call the Fraser Valley Regional District has been home to Indigenous peoples for generations. There are 31 communities with reserve lands in the FERD's jurisdiction and as many as 69 groups with interest in the area. This diverse landscape means that there are many different viewpoints that need to be considered when we make decisions, because what we decide as a local government can affect everyone in different ways now and in the future. So as part of our collective responsibility, I commit that we continually examine the work we do to ensure that our projects, plans, initiatives, and discussion are guided by the principles of inclusion, collaboration, and reconciliation today and in the future. So with that in mind, I'd like to call to order the December 10th, 2024 meeting of the Electoral Area Services Committee of the Whole. And I thought just to start things off, I'd like to welcome everyone. Chair Ross is joining us today. Welcome, Pat. So today's mission is numbers, and this isn't mission impossible, but it's certainly mission challenging. And I admire our finance staff's courage in entering into this labyrinth of electoral area budgets. There be dragons there. But I even have more admiration for the electoral area directors. This is a very complicated process. And so we've each individually had to battle through our EA specific budgets, the bowling alley and the Wilson Road dike, etc. Today is more of a focus on the electoral area wide budgets, the things we share, and an attempt to come up with a consensus that we can all agree on. Director Dixon and I met with the finance staff last week and talked about some of the preliminary discussions and mentioned that this is an avalanche of numbers that come at the electoral area directors at this meeting typically. And it's not always easy for us at the end of the day to come to a consensus, and that perhaps we might need more time. And finance staff have agreed that that time can be made available if we need to go home and think about this and sleep on it and come back for a final decision. So with that preliminary summary, I will turn things over to Ms. Kinnaman. Thank you.
Looking for approval of the agenda, and late items.
Motion, move Director Johnson, second Director Makahonic. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary? Motion carries.
Item 4.1 is the FVRD draft 2025 to 2029 financial plan for electoral area services. And before we turn things over to our Chief Financial Officer and the finance team, I just wanted to build a little bit upon what Chair Dickey just mentioned. So the intention here today is for us to go through all of the budgets that you see here in your package. They are grouped by category, and our intention as we go through those categories is for each of you to pull out any of the budgets that you may have questions or want to make amendments on. If there are budgets that you're not yet ready to make a decision on, we could certainly defer those into January, but it would be our hope still that we're able to reach some consensus on the majority of the items that are here before you today so that we can prepare the full financial plan, draft financial plan, for the entire board to review in January. So with that, I'll just turn things over to Kelly.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. Good morning, electoral area directors. I'm joined here by my colleague, Beth Klein, the controller of the finance department, and we're going to take you through the electoral area services preview budget. This budget is prepared, as Ms. Kinnaman describes, in different categories based upon our year-end financial statements. So they would include specific budgets that pertain to certain electoral areas, as well as electoral area-wide budgets. This morning, we're going to cover a number of topics. as shown on the slides, we're going to talk about what the overview is of the budget. On when we kick off the budget, what are our parameters? What are the risks involved in the financial plan? What are the timelines? Assessment and taxation overviews. We're going to talk about assets and budget at risk, community works funds, electoral area service budgets. Now that is the largest section of the materials that you've received as part of the agenda. And those are the ones that we would like to focus our time on today, as well as we also have financial summaries for your preview. The key themes, when we launch a budget at the FERD, we give direction to all of the managers working on the budgets, as well as discussing this approach and bringing it to the board. We brought forward the budget approach, the financial plan approach to the board in July. So number one is transparency and public engagement. We continue to honor our commitments to the public engagement. We look to gain efficiencies. Gaining efficiencies means looking at certain line items. If money hasn't been spent on it, we could reallocate those dollars before we're asking for new dollars. So we ask for that discipline from every budget manager as budgets are being prepared. We continue to maximize external funding. We look to take opportunities where we can to obtain grant funding rather than raise funds through taxation. We look to reduce risk. That includes minimizing assets at risk, continue to be responsible with our taxpayer funds. In terms of priority setting processes, we met with the electoral area directors in September to prioritize and bring forward projects for consideration. We were asked to identify initiatives according to whether or not they are required or legislative, and or if they are discretionary, we've included a ranking of risks associated with not proceeding. So those risks are color-coded and they're for discussion. Our managers and directors are here today to speak to how they've been categorized. In terms of risks, there are a number of risks with any organization that we are facing. Right now, we have noted this year in the financial plan a number of new and emerging legislative changes, including new Emergency Management Act regulations, new housing legislations, WorkSafe, occupational health and safety regulations. They're all putting new requirements upon us. Workforce retention and is always a challenge, especially with some of the specialized skill sets at the FERD. We note increasing costs. These costs were these rates, of course, CPI rates, consumer price index rates do change and they do fluctuate. These are the rates that were in place at the point in time when we brought forward our financial plan approach to the board in July. So that's the point in time when managers are starting to prepare their budgets. So those are the rates. Construction and consulting contracts were estimated at 6.8%, and operating expenses and supplies were 2.7%. Earlier, I mentioned risks of not proceeding with certain discretionary projects. These are the color codes we've used in our slides. So as you can see, low, medium, and high, we've done rankings. And of course, they're somewhat subjective, but they're based on the professional advice of our staff. Budget timeline. This is the official kickoff is in June, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to making sure our financials are up to date. Not only we spend a lot of time here at this table talking about budgets, but we also have a lot of work to do to make sure our books are up to date and current, our reconciliations are complete. All of that goes into making sure we have the best financial picture in order to prepare the plan for going forward. If your actuals are not maintained and up to date, it's really hard to predict where we're going. So there's a lot of work, and this outlines some of the things and the steps that go on behind the scenes before we are able to bring forward financial plans for your consideration. I should mention, if there are any questions, please let me know. This is a diagram of the timeline. Our financial plan is a phased approach. We have many iterations and stage gates, if you will. So in November, we're starting to receive assessment trends from BC Assessment. We're doing our consultation with yourselves, the EA directors. We had a preview meeting with our senior leadership team and the electoral area directors. In total, we've had two sets of presentations to the EA directors, and it's 72 budgets. And now in December, we're planning on incorporating the feedback that we received today. However those motions come forward, we will be updating our materials and finalizing those 72 electoral area budgets so that we can incorporate that into the full financial plan when we get to the Regional Committee of the Whole. Also in January, we're turning our attention to our municipal CFO consultation, which we do with our member municipalities. So that those will be focused on the regional and sub-regional budgets. And then we're launching into the final phase of our public consultation. So at each stage of our financial plan, we're updating materials on our Have Your Say site and inviting feedback from the public. Our intention is to bring the full budget bylaw forward in February with 104 budgets and 10 operational support budgets. We will be consolidating that ideally in February because we have our auditors coming in March. So we're trying to wrap up the financial plan prior to our audit starting. The public consultation, Have Your Say. So our Have Your Say site provides information about the plan, and it's an outlet for the public. Our intention with this is continuous improvement, as our intention with the whole financial plan is continuous improvement every year. We're looking to obtain feedback and see how we can improve for the next year. In terms of public consultation, we're looking to meet and or exceed the Local Government Act's requirements for public consultation. In terms of pure timelines on the consultation, 2 years ago for the 2023 financial plan, that consultation started in February, but about 1 month before we adopted the plan. And now the last 2 cycles, we've started the public consultation September, many months before the financial plan gets fully adopted. And the Have Your Say site, as you're all aware, has a lot of information as that budget progresses. Information about member municipalities, about electoral area budgets, as well as educational materials, including a glossary of key terms. We're trying to make it very accessible for the public who may not be as familiar with the financial terminology. So we're trying to make it really relevant for the average taxpayer. We did a survey earlier in this season. We didn't have a lot of participants. We're looking to continue to grow our reach in terms of registration on that public consultation site. This chart here is showing a diagram of a chart of where all of the participants reside who took in the survey, participated in the survey. In terms of what we learned from the survey, so we're trying to make sure that we are relevant to the public. So what would people like to know about the budget process? So the top feedback we received, folks would like to know how are taxes calculated and how is the money collected for FVRD services. I also note that people want to know in instances why neighbors pay less than themselves. They probably don't necessarily care so much about why their neighbors pay more than them. They're looking to know why neighbors may pay less. In terms of the other comments, we did receive a few free-form responses. They're all listed here for full transparency on the types of things that people are interested in. We also asked people not only what do they want to learn about the budget process, but how they would like to hear about it. And the most overwhelming responses are via the Have Your Say site and email newsletters or brochures. So in November, we emailed a newsletter through our Have Your Say site to the registered participants on our site. And we will continue to do that as our budget process progresses. So we didn't do newsletters last year, so that's another step that we're trying to improve. The statistics are up from last year. We have a number of new budget visitors and new registrations to our site, but we are continuing to try and get those numbers hopefully into the thousands, not the hundreds in terms of visits. Each year we're looking to improve this. Now this next section is about assessment and taxation. BC Assessment has a responsibility for property assessments, which are the basis of taxation. We update our budget information with the latest property assessments in order to provide effective tools for decision makers to understand the impact of the decisions on the average residential property in each given service area. You'll see that 62% of the FERD's total tax base are residential properties. In the electoral areas, that's 69%. We also note that if properties increase at a rate higher, the values of a property increase at a rate higher than their neighbors, their taxes will increase higher than that average. And a note to ourselves, but also to the public, the FERD taxes are only a portion of the overall tax bill. The FERD taxes are collected for electoral areas. They're collected through the province of BC. And on those tax notices are levies for other charges, including RCMP, school taxes, etc. In our materials today, all of the tax information and the increases are being presented based on the tax assessment values from 2024, and that keeps it comparable. So if you're seeing estimated tax impacts of say $5 compared to last year, it's based on the same assessment as last year. So we're keeping that piece relevant. And then at the very end, when we do the tax information, we update that assessment data.
Chair Dickey, I noted that Director Dixon had her light on and she had a question for Ms. Lonsborough.
Thank you. Director Dixon.
I did. Thank you.
Apologize.
No problem. I could have, made it a little more obvious. I just want to go back to that 69% of electoral area tax base is residential. Because there might be some people that's average, right?
That is average.
And some have a much higher residential portion.
Absolutely. So electoral area H, for example, has 96% of the tax base is residential. And then in electoral area B, conversely, on the other side, I believe it's 26 or 29% of the tax base is residential in electoral area B.
So was it fair follow up? Sorry. Then it's fair to say that the higher the residential tax base, the higher the individual taxes for people. But if you have more utilities paying in your tax, that helps lower your costs.
Yes, through the chair to Director Dixon. Yes, that is correct. Fair assessment or generalization. There's not as many other classes of properties to absorb that tax burden. So it's largely on the backs of the residential property owners in electoral area H, for example. Okay.
Thank you, Director Dixon. The world is not a fair place.
Okay.
Ms. Lowndes, Director Wardenberg.
Through the chair to staff, thanks. Couple questions on the assessment as far as the classes, the 9 classes of taxes. I'm just assuming just for that the farm and the recreation property, that's all in under our, because we have 4 classes and it says here that the assessment has 9 different classes. So I guess it's, I'm assuming that the farm, the recreation property, the managed for it are all in residential class for our purposes.
Through the chair to Director Wardenberg, are you talking specific to your electoral area?
No, just under the general classes of utilities as far as, because if you look forward into this, on the, maybe I should wait for this slide, but we have 4 different categories: residential, utilities, light industrial, and business other. So, but this says there's 9 different tax classes. So I'm just wondering which part of the 9 and where do they go into R4?
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Wardenberg, Ms. Klein, my colleague, is advised that we have, our data includes all 9. So there are 9 property classes, but in our electoral area base, some of those other classes don't have a high value. So what we've done is classified them as business and other, so that would encapsulate some of those other classes. So farm, recreational would all be included in that categorization on those series of slides that are the net taxable assessment. I believe that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, that's right. And one other question. Can we tax differently, like the different classes? Do we have that capability, or like can we tax a higher percentage to a business or a utility than a residential rate?
No, it happens through the chair to Director Wardenberg. It's through the Local Government Act. They're called multipliers. So through the legislation, the tax rates are a multiple of what the residential is. So there's set ratios of how those property classes are taxed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wardenberg. And just through to staff, I believe if we were a municipal government, we would have some control over those taxation rates on industry, utilities, etc. Is that right?
From my experience dating back a number of years, Director Dickey, the multipliers apply to the municipalities as well. So no, they wouldn't be able to distinctly set those.
I might, I'm not certain that I'm right, but I think you might want to check that. I think the electoral areas, for instance, utilities are limited in their taxation, and the municipalities are able to tax at a much higher rate, but I may well be wrong about that.
Thank you through the chair. As I say, my memory is a number of years on municipalities and their multiplier, the specifics of that. So you all could be right.
Thank you.
Okay. This slide shows an abbreviated timeline for regional district budgeting. We are currently, pardon me, this one really shows the different roles. So the FERD calculates the cost of delivering the services. So each of our financial plans, what we look at is we're not focused on rates, we're focused on the dollars that we require to deliver a particular service. BC Assessment, they assess the values of the homes and the properties on those various classes. And then right at the end, right before the tax notices are compiled, the data is through the province of BC calculates what it would take, what tax rate it would take to deliver and provide us the exact dollars that we need. Now, this slide is an illustrative example. You've seen it on our Have Your Say slides. And what it does is show the different services that the FERD provides and a breakdown. In this example, it's a property in electoral area A, and it shows other agency taxes as well. We've talked about regional district budgeting. The financial plan, as you know, is approved annually. And what we do is we look for the dollars that we require to deliver our services. And when the assessed values are set, when the assessed values are finalized, those rates will be set, and bringing the two together to bring us the exact dollars that we require and requested through our budget.
Oh, excuse me, yeah, Director Adamo.
Sorry, just through the chair. Just one question. So with the Area A example that you've demonstrated, what's the assessed value that was based on? So what would be the assessed property value that was based on? Is that $1 million home? Is that a $700,000 home?
Through the chair to Director Adamo, we will have to look that up. We can look that up.
Thanks.
I don't have that at my fingertips. Thank you.
Oh, Director Makahoney.
It's too close.
Still haven't woken up here.
Thank you. Through the chair. I did bring this up before, but I have an area in Area E, Baker Trails. And when you look at the third bullet on the regional district budgeting, it says, meaning there is no windfall for regional districts.
So at times there is, and we'll just use this as an example. So there was a loan, see, and it was paid out, and so that is, and fund is still being taken out, and so although it isn't a windfall, as it is extra and it is banked as a surplus for other possible and likely events. I don't, my perception and what I'm hearing back from residents is this is perceived as a windfall and unaffordable. And I'm wondering how we communicate that in a better way, and maybe this is the second time I brought this up in the form of instead of an email into a letter to, for instance, the strata with a more formalized approach, because this is going to come before the board again, and it can be prevented and save time and money for staff. So it's perceived as windfall, and I'd really like to be able to be in front of this and do it in a way that is communicated so that it's a more formal process, and we can have that. So thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Makahonic. I think we may be talking about two separate things. So what we're talking about on this slide is talking about the timing of the assessments and the dollars required to provide for all of our services. And the point here is the timing is very different than some municipalities. So some municipalities in prior years, they may set their tax rates in advance of knowing assessed values. So when the budgets are complete and the assessed values come in, if the assessed values are higher than they had predicted, there's a possibility that they get more than they had asked for in their budgets, because the municipal tax regime is slightly different than the electoral areas. What we're articulating here is we get exactly to the penny of what we require and what we approve in our financial plan. Now, I believe the question and the point that you're discussing is a specific budget, and we will get through that this afternoon in more detail, or through the day in more detail when that section arises. And I think you're talking about a debt that has been retired, and the financial plan is proposed to keep that funding in there to pay for other services. So I believe Sterling and Tarek will be speaking to that, but that is fully subject to your approval. And when that budget is approved, it would be part of the financial plan. So I'm not sure what section that budget will be in, but we will speak about that today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Thank you, Director McElhannon. Director Jones.
Thank you. Through the chair. Would you happen to know what the average assessed value of a home is in Area A?
Certainly through the chair to Director Johnson, we can look that up and provide that.
Good. Thank you,
Thank you.
Director Johnson. So staff, we electoral area directors aren't really aware of the timeline here, and if we start getting bogged down, could you give us a heads up and so we get through this today?
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you through the chair to Director Johnson. The average, your question is a couple slides in it early, but we will get to that. I do have it here. Based on 2024, the average residential value is 197,600 for electoral area A. This slide we've talked about in prior years. We've also showed this slide on the Have Your Say site, and really it's trying to articulate that the average is just the average. If someone's property goes up greater than the average, the estimated tax impact will go up greater than what we had predicted. Conversely, if their property doesn't go up as much in assessed value, their taxes will likely be less than what we estimate. Now, of course, that's per tax base. We have over 100 different tax bases for each service area. So it does get quite complex. This is a distribution of the assessed values by property class. As we spoke about earlier, electoral area H has the highest residential component at 96%. Electoral area B has the lowest residential percentage at 29%. This is the net taxable assessment by class. This is the total assessment base on the converted value. So on that y-axis, it's not assessed value property homes. That's the total assessment base of all of those 9 property classes within each electoral area. So when you're looking at assessment, this is the breakdown. And as we've articulated earlier in this morning's presentation, the business and other categories include those other assessment classes of those 9 listed earlier. So residential and utilities, you'll see residential, and then the utilities there in blue, light industry and the business and other. And on the chart below, we're showing the residential percentage for each electoral area.
So I just might draw director's attention. So where's the farm classification here? It's not there because farms don't pay taxes. Essentially, they don't pay taxes. So.
Thank you, Director Dickey. Farm assessed values, of course, there is a different assessment methodology through BC assessment, and so they still pay taxes, but they are assessed at a lesser degree, and they have a different methodology. Now, in the assessed chart here, we have included them in that orange category as business and other.
Yeah, just as an example, I know of a property that was paying $3,500 in taxes as residential. It got converted to farm and they were paying $160. Ms. Lounsborough, excuse me for interrupting. Director Castle, please.
Thank you, Chair Dickey, through you to staff. So just to clarify, because I think I know the point that's trying to be made here. Ms. Lounsborough, you just said that the orange represents the farm classification, or farm classification is in the orange?
Correct. Through the chair to Director Castle, within orange, there's also recreational nonprofit. Yes, recreational nonprofit and other, as well as farm. So there's a few different categories within the orange. Because there is such a small proportion of the total assessed values, they've been categorized together.
So if we're trying to make a point that some areas pay less tax because they have more farm classification, we can see here that it's a very small percentage overall.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Lounsborough.
Okay. Now, the next series of slides are trying to articulate the newest information we've received from BC Assessment. So BC Assessment, the data that we have, it's early. They have a new system, BC Assessment. And what we get is information by what is categorized as jurisdiction. Now, I'd prefer not to be diving into a new category of things to explain, but this is we've made a decision to still bring this information forward because it's interesting information on assessment. So the report shows jurisdictions. So you'll see that, for example, electoral area A and B have been categorized together, jurisdiction 732. So in the following series of slides, when we give you the preliminary assessment information, take that and note that electoral area A and B are together. We don't have data separated out at this point, but they don't have that granular of information to provide to us.
Oh, Director Wartenberg.
Just back to that agricultural class. Is there any way you could find out what percentage of ALR lands are in each area? I know it was on a report in the past and I couldn't find it, but I would be very interested in to see that.
Through the chair to Director Wardenberg, I believe what we could provide you is farm class. We would have that information available. And I'm not sure that that is a one-to-one with ALR land because the property owners need to maintain farm classification. So what we have as the finance assessment base, we have what comes from BC assessment. So we would have farm classification.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Director Wardenberg, Director Davidson, followed by Castle.
Just through to Director Wardenberg and staff, I guess. So Mr. Schwartz, our IT manager, had provided, I'd ask the same question by area because it's a GIS exercise. If you're just looking to know, what area is in each area. That report was done. So if I wrote through my email, I can just ship it out. But if not, staff should have it as well.
Thank you, Director Davidson, Director Castle.
And just to clarify, farm classification and ALR designation are not the same thing.
Exactly.
So yeah, very interesting rabbit hole we're going down here already.
Thank you, Director Castle. Ms. Lounsborough.
This slide shows the jurisdiction 732, which is electoral area A and B. It shows the converted assessment base by classification. So electoral area A is residential is at 45% of the total assessment base, and electoral area B is 29%. Now, what we're seeing here is there's no notable class shifts from between years. So what that means is nobody's necessarily being reclassified to a farm class, for example. This slide shows electoral's areas D, E, and H, and the light industry and business other classes are trending similar increases to the assessment base. This slide shows electoral area C, F and G, as well as C within a separate jurisdiction. So it gets a little tricky here. It's showing the residential proportion within each of these electoral areas. This next section, we've started categorizing certain budgets as being at risk. We're trying to strive to maintain assets in a state of good repair. We are looking to maintain and ensure that we have adequate financial planning for the future needs of all of our assets for maintenance, replacement, and the contingency for unplanned events. We have done initial work on our asset replacement valuation and a theoretical annual savings. We also need to consider the reality of the situation for each asset. What's the condition? What's the lifespan? What are the existing reserve balances? And that all informs the reserve contributions and in effect, the taxation levels that we're proposing in each service area. A lot of work has been done on our asset management program at the FVRD. The previous strategic plan included a number of initiatives that are attempting to turn the dial to ensure the FVRD is managing financial risk and financial implications to best serve property owners. I shouldn't say just financial risk, it's risk of these assets. So in 2023, we conducted an inventory and condition of FVRD owned assets. We've developed and the board has approved an asset management policy. We are currently preparing a capital reserve fund policy, which would help set the targets for asset replacement and renewal, which would become part of the financial planning process. And then we will turn our attention to developing a 10-year capital plan come 2025. As part of our capital asset management policy, we are also developing an asset management strategy. And what that is doing is to try and, the policy is very overarching broad goals on our asset management intentions. The strategy would be that practical application on how do we weave that into our operations on a daily basis? How do we weave it into our financial plan? So we're working on that at the moment. And that was part of our financial plan process last year, was to have this asset management strategy developed. So as that's finalized and brought forward through our senior leadership team, we will bring that forward to the board for approval. We'll look to that in the early part of 2025.
Can I get one?
Yeah, Director Wharton.
Just a quick question. Is that a legislative requirement or is that just an initiative on the Fraser Valley Regional District part?
It's I wouldn't necessarily, I can't speak to the exact legislation on that. What I can speak to are requirements through the province of BC. We are receiving a number of inquiries on our asset management program. I would probably define this more as more of a best practice management of our assets. We do have certain responsibilities through the province to ensure that we are planning for these assets. And there are legislative pieces involved. So if there is an asset at risk, we had one as an example, and we'll get to a slide. That one had $2,000 in reserves. So the legislation that would kick in if something unplanned occurred and we didn't have the funds, we would have to do emergency borrowing, or we would have to tax in the next year. So as part of our board's mandate, we're looking to have slow and steady tax increases rather than those risky spikes for a taxpayer. Hopefully that's helped answer the question.
That's a nice summary. Thank you, Ms. Lounsborough. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Yep. Pardon me? Oh, excuse me. Mr. Chan.
If I may, through to Director Dickey, I'll add to what Ms. Lounsborough said. The province is using a bit of a, we'll say, a carrot versus the stick approach with this. A lot of the grant programs that we've made applications to or we've received funding through have asset management requirements. For example, the Cultus Lake grant that we're currently working through has significant requirements for us to report out on like asset renewal profiles for all the infrastructure that we're constructing, as well as, you know, us reporting to the province how we're building out our asset management plan specifically for this facility. So it's not necessarily legislatively required, but it is something that shows up in a lot of our day-to-day work and a lot of these grants that we require.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Mr. Chan. Director McElhonick.
So through the chair, so is that almost like when you're doing a grant, almost like an in-kind ask that they want to see that you have that in place, and then your grant would be more chance of being successful? Is that what it translates to?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. If we want to have a successful application, we should expect to have those sorts of programs in place.
Good. Thank you, Director McElhonick. Mr. Chan. Ms. Lounsborough.
Okay. Thank you. And through the chair, thank you, Mr. Chan. And I would also like to add that we brought forward through our year-end financial statements last year, our new accounting standard that it's not ours, we were required to abide by, which is called asset retirement obligations. So there were a number of activities related to our asset management. So they're not only coming through from the province of BC, we had significant work to do to categorize and assess the financial risks and the obligations when assets are retired, if we have asbestos repair to do, etc. So there were a lot of implications that we did last year for our asset retirement obligations. And as well, Ms. Klein has reminded me that by 2030, the province of BC will require us to have a 10-year capital plan. So we are right on track with our previous strategic plan to have a 10-year capital plan in place. And that is all part of, as Mr. Chan articulates through the province, they are asking, and more through our reporting, we have to report on our asset management practices. And then by 2030, we'll have to tell them and provide our 10-year capital plan.
So just my experience here, it appears that we have really upped our game in ensuring that we have reserves in place in the last few years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The assets at risk and one budget at risk. The next two slides articulate and summarize the status we've been tracking in this format for the last couple of years. The status, we want to make sure that budgets that have little reserves, they have very aging assets. We want to make sure that we're monitoring those and putting away for those asset requirements in the future. Now, I note the first one will be talked about at the regional board, but really this one, we call that one the combined E911. That's a budget at risk. And that one, we had to start taxation last year, if you'll recall, because the call answer levy was rapidly declining due to cancellation of landlines. So we put that on there to monitor. Now, the next few are electoral area specific. So we have Boston Bar, North Bend garbage. We have a low landfill closure reserve, equipment reserve, and a surplus reserve. But the soil revenues have been traditionally used to offset operational costs and build closure reserve funds. But in recent years, the soil revenue has fallen well short of the targets. So we are monitoring that at an amber. We have recently added the Popcom sewer is because this system has zero reserves in place. The development has not progressed as fast as we originally forecast. So we had anticipated a larger tax base, in short, and we do have a delayed contributions to savings. So we're considering this asset at risk. North Bend Water, we have ranked that as a high risk in red. The contributions to the reserves have been previously declining, and we have little funds available to make repairs. Yale Water, we're pleased to say prior financial plans, we had this at a high risk, a red, and we've now downgraded it to a medium risk. The service has had limited historical contributions to reserves, but we did do a refurbishment recently. So, and the reserves and surplus are slowly increasing. So we are slowly making progress on some of our assets at risk. The next slide shows the remainder of our assets at risk. And these are all categorized at an amber. Morris Valley Sewer, it's aging infrastructure, and there's limited savings in place. This one was also recently downgraded to a medium. We are working, and the last few years we've made some traction on our reserve funds.
Ms. Director Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on the Showmox landfill. The equipment, excuse me, of 37,000. Is that for the scale?
Through the chair to Director Johnson. Yeah, that would be for any of the equipment that the FERD still owns at the site. That's the remaining balance from when the Cat 950M and the roll-off trucks were purchased up at the landfill. So we had a much larger reserve previously, in that 37,000 that is what was left over. But yeah, it'd be for things like the scale, or any like the electric fencing, or maybe the organics facility.
Right, because at this point, it's the contractor that owns the operating equipment as far as like
That's
dozer,
correct. Yeah,
whatever,
the contractors
and the
are
trucks.
responsible for all equipment.
Right, okay, thanks.
Good. Thank you, Director Johnson. Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just comment on the North Cultus sewer. I'm assuming it's in there because it has zero in the reserve fund, but it is a brand new facility that's almost open, and I guess I struggle a little bit thinking that it's going to break down immediately. However, just reserve funds now are going into that account. Is that accurate?
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Dixon, we fully anticipate that once this system is up and running, that this will not be on the list next year.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Ms. Lounsberg.
Thank you. The drainage East Popcom is also on here, limited funds available. And we are continuing to work on replenishing this reserve fund and working with our area director on this plan. Jaroche Water reserve contributions are low, and they are less than we had predicted that would be required. So we have this one as at risk. And then we've just spoken about North Cultus Sewer. We fully anticipate once this is live, we will remove this from the assets at risk. Did we jump in? Okay. This next section is the Community Works Fund grant planning. So grant plans were approved during the preparation of last year's financial plan and included funding allocations for the Community Works Fund program. As you'll recall, we received a new Community Works Fund agreement from UBCM for the 2024 to 2034 period. Some of the highlights of the new agreement include the now eligibility of purchasing fire trucks as a standalone project. Resilience category was created to replace disaster mitigation. We have some new eligibility, expansion of the requirement, the eligibility projects. So feasibility studies, detailed design projects, previously ineligible, now eligible. Non-fixed assets are ineligible investments. Additional reporting requirements for projects that receive over $25,000. We note that that's our internal teams, not just the finance teams, the project management teams, looking at a number of aspects of the benefits within the communities. And I also note, very important for the financial plan, the funds must be spent within 5 years of receipt. So each year we need to allocate all of the funds, and then they actually need to be expended within 5 years of receipt.
If I might interrupt, as I understand it, as long as we have a plan in place, that if the construction of something takes longer, then there's some allowance for that. Is that correct?
This new agreement included more clarity on ensuring that those funds are spent within 5 years.
So is that something that electoral area directors should be worried about? That if their project isn't moving as fast as what they hope, that suddenly this money is going to be vaporized?
It's something that we all need to work closely together on, and depending on the timing and the status of the project, we would be more than willing to talk to UBCM and see if there are allowances for that. But we do need to have funds spent within 5 years is per the agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. What the next slides show are funding that had been included as part of the previous financial plan. They're shown in the slides for awareness and direction. And we have plans for each electoral areas specifically for the community works funds. And we have shown on the format is the same. We're showing the committed funds already and the projects that we've already previously reported as committed. And then down below in the section at the bottom, you'll see proposed projects. So those are the projects that are proposed within the 2025 financial plan, and total available and uncommitted are the dollars at the bottom that we're looking to ensure are committed. So we report this every year to the funders, and we do get questioned on whether or not why funds are unallocated. So I'm happy to go through each electoral area if that suits you, Director Dickey.
Yeah, is that what directors would like? No? Doesn't sound like it.
Okay.
Director Jones and Director Meckel.
Thank you. Well, I'm just curious, is this the opportunity I need to take to discuss this or another day?
So directors, I'm assuming could either discuss it now or could discuss it one-on-one?
Through the chair to Director Johnson and to Director Dickey, we're happy to discuss it now or through each of the service area budgets today. If there are plans, we are required to have a full plan for each funding program. So CWF, we need to have these dollars fully allocated by the end of the year. So if there are questions or there are other projects that we discuss through this afternoon's session as we go through each service area, we're happy to discuss that there as well. And then go from there.
Or I can even just send emails just for changes that I would like to do.
Okay, so what,
Just to reiterate though, this has to be done by year end. And the FVRD office is closed over the holiday period. So ideally, we want to get to an allocation for 2024 today.
Johnson?
Okay. Okay, well, the chain link fence is more a cosmetic thing. It's not necessary, and so I wanted that removed. Not that this affects the taxes for my residents, but I'm wanting to keep as much money in the coffers for a fire engine. And so, and the same with the roof repair. It's actually not a repair at Hall 2. It's just maintenance and there's no leaks. So I'd like to remove that 7,500. And then with the geohazard assessment, also I'd like to keep that 5,000 in the community works fund. Like I say, trying to save for a fire truck, but if, you know, if I can find my note. If there's an offer of making application for a grant for that, then that'll be, you know, a separate issue. But I don't want to elect to do that. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Staff can take that as direction. Got too many lights on here or what's going on?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to Director Johnson. The dollars at the bottom need to be zeros. So we need to allocate more money to projects. So in 2024, the year-end balance is showing we have 136,000 unspent. We need to allocate those dollars to projects. So through 2025, you'll see the column on 2025 takes your unfunded dollars from 2024, and that's your opening balance for 2025. That's 136,000. You add those projects reported as committed and the proposed projects, and you deduct that from your available balance. You still have 65,000 more to spend that you need to allocate. So Beth's taken some notes, but I don't know that that's fully allocating those $65,000.
That money can't be used towards a fire truck in 2027?
It certainly could be.
Yes, well, that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Johnson. I got Director Makahonic, Adamo, and Davidson and Dixon.
Thank you. Through the chair. So I had hoped to come in and have a meeting, and unfortunately I had a personal situation with my family. So I'm hoping to come in this week and kind of go over things to talk about some allocation. Is that an option on this? I was going to maybe try and schedule something today for early next week.
Through the chair to Director Makahonic, there's 2 points. I'll respond to that, and then my colleague Ms. Klein has a point of clarity for Director Johnson. on the question on the grant plan, we would prefer to have the grant plans resolved today as we're doing the financial plan because they are embedded together.
So, I understand that, but I had a death in the family and I wasn't able to come in. I don't know if I can allocate this. I am not comfortable with allocating the whole thing to the sewage project, which was what we had there earlier. Thank you.
Through the chair to Director Johnson, I just wanted to clarify, I heard the first two of removing the chain link fence and the roof repair. Is that correct? But I just want to come back to the geohazard assessment. So that one's considered committed at this point. You are wanting to remove it. Is that what you?
The 5,000 for 2025.
Okay, so for that one, it was $25,000 was in 2024. We're just showing $5,000 in 2025 as we had to spread that project out over the 2 years,
Okay.
but it's already committed.
Okay, I thought that was a new commitment, but right, in 2024, it was 25,000.
Yeah, just
Okay.
how we had to carry
Yeah,
it
I
forward.
understand that. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. Thank you, Director Johnson. We have Director Adamo.
Thanks very much to the chair. Mine is really quite simple. It goes back to last year when this came up on the budget item, and it had to do with the costs that were allocated for a particular project. In this case, specifically, generator purchase and installation at $60,000 per haul. And I questioned at that time that exorbitant cost. In the time since last year, I've actually, in my other life, I've installed 3 of these professionally through Chilliwack companies that are obviously registered and legitimate, and they've already done another fire hall for another jurisdiction that is not related to the regional district. And I can easily save you $50,000, $40,000 to $50,000 guaranteed legitimately on the cost of that for what the requirement is for both fire halls. So I'm questioning how the $60,000 became the number that was being used and why we can't go back and say, hey, that's too friggin' expensive. Because it literally doesn't cost that much. It probably did 4 years ago when there was a real big increase in people wanting to use backup generator systems. But our facilities already have the plumbing in place for the backup propane and everything like that. So the additional cost, that's just exorbitant and irresponsible for me to let that go. I know it's already budgeted and it's approved and all that, but I'd rather put that $40,000 somewhere else and save it and say $40,000 each place and guarantee that can happen. That's all. Thanks.
May I speak to that? So we put out an RFP for this, and I believe it's closing possibly this week. And so then we'll have true costs. And it might even, I'll just check with the manager responsible for this to see what those costs are. So we should be able to have true costs. And I expect too that number would significantly come down. I think that was a placeholder that was put in last year for an unknown, but I can get that for you quite quickly. Thank you.
Thanks. Good. Thank you, Director Dom. I believe there are other fire halls that are looking at these generator installations, so we would all fall into that same category where it would appear that maybe the budget numbers are higher than they're necessary.
Yeah, so these are placeholders, I believe, estimated last year. And so we should have up-to-date numbers and true costs shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Ms. Barker, I believe it is next. Director Davidson's up.
Thank you, Chair. So can you just bring up area briefly? So looking at the, oh, okay, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'm looking at, okay. So procedurally, we talked about the need for CF and G to basically talk together about some of these things. Is that our need today is to essentially, just to restate, what you're looking for today is to have, in my case, have that 427K spoken for. Okay, when does area C, F, and G speak together about North Fraser?
Thank you through the chair to Director Davidson. When those budgets come, when the North Fraser budget comes up I think that would be a great opportunity to connect this afternoon, like today.
Okay, so by the end of today, hopefully provide some direction on that number, but not right now. That makes sense?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
thanks.
that would be great when we get to that budget, and we'll have that one on screen. Yeah.
Thank you, Director Davidson. Director Dixon?
I guess for me, it's just, I have most of my numbers. I just, I guess they come up in budgets today, but I'm also waiting on prices for, a couple of things as well. So do the best I can.
Chair Dickey, I think that this is a good moment, just looking at the clock and looking at the agenda. I think this might be a really good time for us to take a recess and then look for a motion to go into closed session.
Okay, I believe is Director Wardenberg is the only last. You're good? Okay. Excuse me. Thank you. That sounds like a good idea to me. So.
Okay, so if we could have a resolution to go into closed?
Motion, Director Davidson, second Director Adamo. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Okay, we'll just take a 5-minute recess.
Great.
We've returned to our open session. So we'll just turn things back over to our Chief Financial Officer, Kelly Lonsborough.
Okay. Good afternoon. At this point in our meeting, we're going to begin to look through the electoral area service area budgets. We have 72 budgets to go through. What we'll do is we will go through, well, actually I have a bit of an agenda, so why don't I just lean on that? First of all, we have the EA area-wide budgets. This is a summary slide. We're just including that for your awareness. Notwithstanding, we will be looking at all budgets that impact electoral areas today, including electoral area specific budgets. This is a summary of the electoral area wide budgets, and it shows the electoral area administration, building inspection, emergency management, bylaw enforcement, electoral area animal control, electoral area planning in the regional library. We have a total in 2024 of just over $4.3 million, and our total proposed requisition is just over 4.7 million for an increase of 380,000. I will note in preparing summaries, while some of the budgets have options. So in preparing the financial summaries, decisions had to be made on which option to put forward. So we've gone through, and you'll see asterisks here. So building inspection, there are 2 options within the presentation. The financial impacts here are based upon option 1. And then bylaw enforcement, similarly, that one was based on option 2. But we will go through each of those budgets, and you'll have the ability to comment on both of those options. What I just want to highlight here is we're talking about a total increase for electoral area-wide budgets of $380,000. Now, the electoral area service budgets are broken down based on our financial statements and how our financial statements are compiled. So all of the service areas are grouped based on these categories. So general government services, protective services, transportation services, environmental health, environmental development, recreation and culture, and utilities being sewer and water. Now, so we're going to start off with the general government section today. And this is our navigation slide. So I'll be asking Beth Klein to go through each of the budgets that you choose. So for each category, what I'd like to ask is, when we get to this navigation slide, if this, through the chair, you can advise which, if any of these budgets you'd like us to walk you through today, to talk about any proposed changes, or just to go through the slides. We know you've had an opportunity to review them. We're also happy to go through each and every one of them. Chair Dickey, can you please let us know your preference?
Okay, directors. I have do people want to take a look at their electoral area administration budget? Yeah, okay.
At this time, I'll pass it over to Beth Klein, our controller.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so starting with our electoral area admin. So this service area is for the administration of all 8 electoral areas. The key highlights of this financial plan, we are continuing to use surplus to soften tax requisition. And throughout the 5 years, that slowly tapers off. The 5-year plan is largely due to increased costs of travel. And the taxation segmented to EAs is based on board resolution, which we'll go through today. So in this budget, we fund for the elected official fees and expenses, the elections, area-wide administration, and the DeRoche Center. So just wanted to start talking about how the director's expenses are taxed. So this is based on resolution. The first section we are calling common director's expenses. So these are expenses that are taxed to all electoral areas based on the assessment value. So in this area are the EASC meeting travels and meals, 1 UBCM delegate. So this is usually the chair of EASC unless it's designated otherwise. 1 FCM delegate, 1 UBCM forum delegate. Any EASC directed attendance at workshops or conferences, EA public hearings, strategic planning meetings, and communications expenses such as internet usage or cell phone. So on the other side, we have expenses that are taxed to individual electoral areas. These are not based on us, or they aren't broken down based on assessment. They are taxed to the EA specifically. And so in here, we have the weekly travel and meals to FERD office for anything related to the electoral area specifically. Conference attendance outside of the chair of EASC or the designate for these conferences. Workshops and training opportunities of interest, and the interconstituency travel.
Just a question, excuse me, a UBCM forum? What would that be?
Through the chair, that would be for the I think it's reference to the electoral area directors forum that's usually held in February each year.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, Director Cass.
Thank you. Through you to staff, the expenses taxed to individual EAs, where do we see that? What service area do we see that?
Yeah, so these are all within the service area 102.
Okay.
On the tax bill, it's consolidated under the area-wide taxes.
So even within 102, you're breaking out. Good grief. Thank you.
And I think just a note as well, like these are budgeted values, so we actually tax on what was spent in the prior year. So it could change before.
Okay. Director Davidson.
Just on this, I take it this would all show up on the SOFI report. Is there anything else besides this that shows up on the SOFI report as director expenses?
I get the remuneration is the other piece of it, but I think this is most of what's in that expense line. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Director O'Donnell.
Is there just a ballpark in general, like UBCM, FCM, UBCM forum cost per EA?
We do have, it's kind of all over the place. So it depends on if we get into that block of discounted hotel rates, where it's being held, it varies over the years.
It's fair to say that it's a tremendously significant amount of money for all of us to attend the conference, especially if it's out of province.
It's definitely been increasing over the last few years.
Yeah. Okay, I'll look for some other numbers.
Thank you, Director O'Donnell. We did receive some numbers from staff on the costs of these UBCM conferences. The hotels, I couldn't believe how expensive they are. maybe up to $400 a night. Yeah. Yeah. I thought, I thought might be 200. Director Wardenberg and then Director Castle.
Yeah, just going to the public hearings, the cost of public hearings, is that to do with planning, public hearings? What are you referring to there in the,
Yeah, that's correct. For planning.
Thank you. Wardenberg, Director Castle.
Thank you. Just to kind of follow up on Director Davidson's question would you characterize the expenses, these expenses, to be consistent amongst all of the EA directors, the amounts? Or is there some is there a huge variation in those budgets?
There is. We did put together a trend graph that I can pull up. So, of course, if we're going back to 2018 in this line graph here, and so how we've done this is the bottom half of the graph is those individual electoral area expenses. And that pink line is that common expense. So of course it's much larger, but you can see that between so from 2018 to 2024, which is 2024 is only a portion of what the year will be, because we haven't received everyone's expense claim at this point. But you can see that it varies significantly over that time frame.
Well, and my question was consistent amongst the EAs. I mean, they're all within, they're kind of consistent.
Most are.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Castle, Director McAhonick, and then Dixon.
I just had a question. So, for example, if I go to support area C or H for public information or meetings, is that area wide or does that go to me? I think that goes to me, doesn't it? I put it in my expenses.
It depends what it's for. So for public hearings, those ones would be a common expense. So if you're going to a public hearing for another area, that would be a common. It depends what the nature of the meeting or the event is for.
Yeah, I might not be allocating. I mean, not like I did a ton of them, but yeah. And then I guess the chair would be low because even if they attended, that would not be an EA cost. So
Correct.
that's thank you very much.
Good, Director Dixon, I think you were up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment on that slide too. I think it's a little bit challenging because certainly some of us have farther to travel, so the much farther. So the mileage claims would be higher. I would.
Thank you, Director Dixon. Director Davis.
Just a question for EA public hearings. Why under this service area and not planning?
The travel for the directors to go to the public hearings is under 102, but any other cost that is for that actual event would be part of planning.
Oh, okay. So when the slide said public hearings, you're only referring to
just
the
the
travel.
travel, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Or the expenses around it.
Good. Thank you. That seems to have met people's needs.
Okay. Okay, so for this service area for proposed projects, we just have one mandatory, and that's in 2026, and that is the election. So it's estimated to cost $75,000. And this is funded partially by savings, partially by new taxation. We have been putting away money each year. It was increased in, oh, sorry. Oh yeah, here we go. It was increased to $19,000 being put away each year to make up that 75,000. So for the service area total financials, we have broken this down to show those area specific budgets in separate line items here. So you can see in 2024, they were budgeted at 5,000. This was just because it's always based on actuals in the prior year before we tax. So we've updated it based on our forecast for 2024. And of course, these numbers are a point in time. We don't have all of the 2024 expenses at this point, so it is budgeted based on what we know to date.
Good. Director Dixon.
Well, I'm just have to ask this one. So when I'm looking out to now, I realize it doesn't matter today. 2026, the operating expenses. I'm just curious what you're anticipating going from 47.9 to 123.
I believe that's the election, so there'd be $75,000 in there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. We're moving forward.
So next is the grant and aid budget. So this is the service area for the grant and aid program. We have put forward all of our 2024 applications now, so the last ones will come through on Thursday. And we have updated values based on director's feedback for that 2024 grant request funded line there, and that's reflective in all of the financial summaries.
Okay.
Okay.
Looks like we're good.
Okay. And would we like to go through Area B, Economic Development? This one is just for Director Adamo. That's okay. So Area B, Economic Development, we have two options. We can go through this one. Okay. So we're happy with the reduced taxation. Okay. Option 2.
Okay, thank you. So through the chair, at this point, we'd be looking for a motion to direct staff to include the following budgets as presented in the draft financial plan. So this would be for general government for service areas 102, 105, and 130.
Okay, staff, Director Dixon.
Well, I wasn't going to move that yet. I was going to confirm. So when I'm looking at the 105, the grant need for area H is 18,000. That's what was approved last year, not what we've approved next year. Right. Okay. Sorry. I was paying attention.
So you are making the motion? Thank you.
And I'll second.
Seconder, Director Castle. Discussion. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Okay, so next we have our protective services area. I've just split this into two sections just for, first of all, it's a really big list. So first we'll talk about the fire management and all of the fire protection. So, yeah. So if we can go through individuals, just looking for direction on which ones you'd like to go through.
Okay, so the 237 is the shared expenses.
237 is the administration. And so this one is actually, it's similar to an operational support budget. It gets allocated to all of the fire areas.
Great. Good. Directors, which budgets would you like to see it us to take a look at? Pardon me? 217. Okay, we've got 217 and Director McAhonic's light is on.
I would like to know if, when we get to area E, if we could just ask if the recent increases are included.
Okay, so we'll start off with North Fraser, Director Davidson, and then Director McAhonic.
Thank you.
Director Davidson.
Just for context on 217, this just comes back to my earlier comments about grant allocations. If there are shared costs amongst the three shared costs that should be split up from grant allocations from the three directors and three EAs, which I guess now's the time.
Something? Thank you. I'll just speak to that. If you could actually proceed to the next slide. Thank you. So on this slide, you'll see that there are two major expenses. One that's happening now with the purchase of a fire engine, just under $700,000. Director Castle, I believe, has designated $200,000 of Community Works funds towards that purchase already. It's not too late to contribute more funding if you wanted to towards that purchase. But there also is a purchase coming up in 2028, large purchase again of another vehicle. Currently, we have in the budget that those funds will come from reserves. This budget is contributing significantly towards reserves to pay for these funds. However, any Community Works funds that can be attributed to these expenses certainly could result in less contributions to reserves needed and possibly could see some tax reductions then. So that's a possibility. In terms of sharing expenses, of course, that's up to you. There's no formula for that. There are two, I believe, expenses within Community Works funds that have been allocated. They're very small. I think it's like $7,000 and $5,000 or something like that. A third and a third and a third. That if you were interested, that is one method. Or perhaps you'd be interested in understanding the proportion of the total tax base that is attributed to your area. Or you don't have to give any money at all. Yeah.
Okay, excuse me, Director Davidson, go ahead.
So my inquiry is mostly around equity, doing what's fair. And because, we're all trying to figure out how best to allocate our funds. We're three different directors coming up with three different solutions, some of which are touching the service area, some are not. I know sometimes I hear about, one director may want to allocate for replacement or for reserves or replacement of some apparatus in the hall in their area, but it's a shared service. So the other argument is that, all halls together should be sharing the costs, and the Community Works funds allocation should be proportionate somehow. And it's that somehow, I don't know how readily we can figure that out here now on the fly. So for myself, with all this in mind, I'm thinking, I have nothing allocated towards 217 out of grant funding in anticipation of having this kind of more fulsome discussion, but that's not equitable. So I'm kind of challenged as to how to proceed from that today, here and now.
Okay. Thank you, Director Davidson. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. I appreciate Director Davidson's sentiment of equity. It's not sentiment around equity. Again, I think even on the North Fraser, our three areas are all quite unique from each other. And when you start looking at prioritizing grant funds, and again, not all of us have the same balance in our grant funds account, and not all of us have as many services to deliver as others. For me, for Area G, the largest single year-over-year tax increase in dollars is for North Fraser. And so when I look at these significant capital expenditures that we need to make for the residents of Area G, I feel that the fire department is pretty much the number one priority. And given that there aren't a lot of other draws on those grant funds, I think that it's prudent for Area G to contribute some of the grant funds in order to lessen the tax burden on the residents. I understand that will be a benefit of residents in areas F and C as well. But again, I'll reference back to Director Wardenberg's comments about being a federation. And again, while I think equity is a nice thought, this is about priorities for Area G. And to be quite frank, I've got $200,000 allocated from CWF for 2026. And as we're hearing, 2026 might be a tough budget year. So I'm actually happy that 200,000 is sitting in 2026 for North Fraser, to try to keep that, as I said, single largest increase in the Area G budgets, to keep that at bay, at least for 2026.
Okay, thank you, Director Castle, Director Davidson. Oh, Director Wardenberg speak.
Thank you, Director Castle, for your generosity. I am also concerned about the equity. And I do have some community works funds available, but if there's nothing put forward at this time, I'm okay with that too. I'll direct it somewhere else. I just have one other question as far as the line items on most of these fire budgets, fire department budgets, sorry. The operating expenses. As far as the line item, they seem to be most of them going down over year. And just had a question about that.
While we're just looking that up, I just would like to add a point of clarity. I know it was suggested to potentially look at the equity and potentially sharing costs and grant funds based on assessment base. We've just ran some quick numbers just so you had an idea. If we did do it on assessment base, the total proportion between CF and G, C would bear 49% of the burden, F would have 29%, and G would be 22%. I mean, of course, it's up to your decision and discretion on if you share evenly or if you allocate proportionally, but I just wanted to share those proportions with you now while we have them. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Lounsbury.
And just to speak to the operating expenses, in 2025, there was the right year. There is some grant funded projects in that line item. So there's a training grant that was included in that expense, but it's funded by grant. So it may look like it's going down in the expense, but it's just a one-off project in there.
And also, we have been trying to schedule replacement of gear, like all the equipment that they don. And some of that, when we took over, we had to do inventory and more had to be replaced. And now we're starting to see a more scheduled approach to that, with expense becoming more regular instead of the one-time increase in cost.
Good. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Director Davidson.
Just thank you, Directors Wardenberg and Castle, for your comments. For myself, I tend to be leery to spend when I know there's some unknowns ahead that could drain it all and then some. Those unknowns being septage and also flood control. So a lot of that is just feeding into my reticence for contributing grant funding towards this particular service area at this time. So given that none has been allocated, I'm certainly content to move forward on that. And on the addressing equity, all I can say is we'll keep it in mind, keep, looking forward, look for opportunities to make up for it somewhere along the line. So for now, I'd rather just leave grant funding out of this one for area staff. Thank you.
Sounds like a very joyful partnership. Thank you. Staff.
Just to clarify a point here, there is just a small amount that was allocated in the CWF for this financial plan. So that building repairs, the $23,000. It was split 3 ways evenly in the CWF plan. And I believe there's another one. Nope, that was it. Sorry.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ms. Klein. Moving forward.
Okay, so that's it for North Fraser, unless there's any questions. Okay, I can go back to 212. Okay, so for Area E, so I understand there was some conversations with the fire team, and the presented slides for the financials here don't reflect those changes that have been discussed. But we can amend this budget to include those. So my understanding, it would be around $6,000 increase over the next 3 years.
Me. Director Makahonic, are you? Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank Ms. Barker and Ms. Klein for the work they've done on this. I really appreciate it. So I guess that would be, so year 1 would be 25, 26 would be year 2. So that would be practice rates, and then it would be call out rates, and then it would be honorariums, and that would be about 6,000 per year each year.
Yes, that's right. So for this purpose, for the budget purpose, we would amend this to have an additional $6,000 for 3 years. And then we would come back possibly at the December meeting of the board, and you could make a resolution to change the bylaw according to the changes that you've made to afford the bylaw changes. For example, changing the practice rates, and as we discussed. So that can come in your resolution to the board in December. But now this is about amending it $6,000, 25, 26, 27 to afford that.
Perfect. Okay. So, and then would that go underneath salaries, benefits, and operational support? Would I see it reflected there?
Yeah, I think that's where it's been grouped into. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And maybe offline, I can get some support with a motion.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you again, both of you.
Good. Thank you, Director Makahonic. And moving forward.
Is there any other service areas?
Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this where you would like to know that I'm planning on putting $100,000 community work funds in the Columbia Valley Fire Department for 2024 to? Yes.
That'd be great.
Okay, I'm planning on doing that. Trina was working on it, but I just haven't quite heard back from her, but yeah, so I have, and it would be to sort of offset the taxation for the truck that was purchased.
Yeah, Trina has that written down here in her notes. So an increased transfer from community works funds in 2024 for $100,000, right? For the fire truck purchased in 2024. And then we would reduce transfer to reserve in 2024 by $100,000 for a fire truck that had been purchased. So we no longer would need to take that money out of reserve. And then we'd update the draft budget by reducing future contributions to reserve to reflect that $100,000 that now we have. And that would limit your tax requisition increases. Trina's done some preliminary work, but we need to confirm that through finance. But it looks like then your resulting tax increase this for 2025 would be just over 4%.
But it would still keep the other the reserves and surplus healthy moving forward, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Dixon. It appears we are ready to move forward.
Any other in the fire production
see anybody showing any interest.
Okay.
Okay, so you need a motion?
So in this case, it would be the following budgets as amended into the draft financial plan.
So I'd like to make that motion. Move Director Dixon, second Director Castle. Discussion, hearing none. All in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Okay, so our next section is continuing the protective services area. So this would be building inspection, emergency management, bylaw enforcement, flood control for 4 areas, and our EA animal control for dangerous dogs. Happy to go through whichever budgets you'd like to.
Okay, what are people's interests?
I'd be happy to see them go
Yeah.
through emergency management, just
Okay.
briefly.
Director Dixon, thank you.
So the emergency management service area is for managing and maintaining the emergency management organization, program, policy, and service. Key highlights of this financial plan based around the act. It's not fully understood and the workloads are not previously budgeted for. There's new requirements still unfolding for engagement, business continuity, risk assessment and management, inclusion of animals, intersection. And core services for this area are emergency planning, community preparedness, EOC, and operations, so emergency operational center, training exercises, evacuee services, fire smart, public alerting. Another highlight of this service area financial plan is the maintaining of savings for unrecoverable emergency costs. So budget risks and challenges for this area are the changing environment and hazard complexities, as well as the unknown Emergency and Disaster Management Act and forthcoming regulations. So considerations for this service area is a vast land, mass small tax base, high expectations, overlapping jurisdictional complexities, and unplanned emergency activations. The proposed projects for the service area include Fire Smart. This is a grant program. There is I don't believe it's been submitted yet, but there will be a grant application for Fire Smart for the 600,000. There is 3 other grant programs here that will only move forward if the grant is approved, and that's the evacuation planning for Area A, emergency operations, improvements and training, the ESS grant equipment and training, and then, of course, we have our unplanned emergency activations.
Okay. And the 600,000, that would be directed to what kind of a program?
It's for the Fire Smart program, and I can let Tarina add to that.
Thank you. Our Fire Smart program funding covers the cost of the salary and benefits for a Fire Smart coordinator. It also covers home assessments, rebates, miles, and any other operational costs associated with the Fire Smart programming. It covers our chipping and binning programs. It additionally covers in-community events that are Fire Smart specific. And we have submitted the application just last week, which is a new rhythm for us in applying from a January to December timeframe rather than a March to or 24-month March to March timeframe. We're trying to get that into alignment with our rhythm of financial planning as well. And we've submitted a generalized application for the maximum 600,000. But what we receive out of that is only what we actually spend within the program to reimburse us for our expenses.
So is that an annual sum that we would be expected to spend 600,000?
It's yet to be known and finitely understood. The typical rhythm is a maximum $800,000 application on a 24-month period. This is the first time that we're trying to submit a 12-month application. And so it will allow up to a maximum of $600,000 with a minimum baseline of $200,000. So there's a baseline funding of $200,000 for the regional district and an additional $50,000 for each electoral area that we're eligible to, which brings us to that $600,000 application. So it's unlikely that we can achieve $600,000 worth of work in a year, but we have applied for the maximum to give us the space to use it appropriately within our constituency. And what we don't allocate would not be eligible for reimbursement, therefore it would just be unutilized and returned to the province.
Okay, good. Thank you. I do not see anybody interested in this, so I suppose we'll move forward. Oh, excuse me, Director Castle.
If we're done with 205, I'd like to see 207, please. And I think with this one, to cut to the chase, I want to know if option 1 or option 2 is included in the plan. And I don't believe that we've seen the tables that show the increases of the service areas, including the soil deposit bylaw. So I feel like we're kind of looking at this one a little bit blind. I think the slides, the area specific slides have it without the soil deposit bylaw.
That's correct.
And so we're kind of being asked to make a decision without knowing what we're deciding on. So just to confirm, the plan as presented, the motion at the end of this, does it include the soil deposit bylaw or not include the soil deposit bylaw?
It does not.
It does not. So what information do you have to walk us through the best way to make that decision?
Through the chair to Director Castle, I think your point is well made, and in future, if we have something like this, we should be showing the tax impacts with both. We need to consider that or show the larger ask in the presentation materials. So I apologize for that. Beth is just going to look up and do some mathematic gymnastics at the moment to tell you the tax impacts of including this first option in and what that would the impacts of that. So just bear with us a moment.
Well, and I'd suggest that if we need to come back to this, then that's nope, you're
Yeah, we're good. So I can give a range of the impact. So starting with area A would be a $3.20 impact compared to 2024 taxation. So not just the difference for the average taxpayer.
and okay. So
I'll
as long as we've all got that, the other piece readily at our disposal, because I think that's what directors are going to really want to know. What's the impact in the increase with the soil deposit bylaw?
just the difference, you mean?
I think.
If I could just to clarify. So I think what Beth is saying, if you look at your electoral area EA-wide services by your individual area, we'll use area A as an example because it's on top and it's first. So right now it looks to me like the financials have been presented. It would be an increase of 47 cents. That would be without the soil deposit bylaw. And what I'm hearing Ms. Klein say is that with the soil deposit bylaw, it would be $3.20.
And so looking at the range, I can give all areas, but area C would be a $9.60. Area H would be the most at $15.89. Sure, I'll go through all of them. Okay. Okay, so area B, the average taxpayer would be $6.26. Area C, $9.62 increase. Area D is $15.70. Area E, $11.24. Area F, $10.35. Area G, $11.40. And then area H, $15.89, so $15.90.
So we're having this discussion without, like, are we talking about whether or not we want the soil deposit bylaw and hiring an additional staff member for it, or just the bylaw without a staff member and other options around that? Like, is that where we're at? I'm just not quite sure.
Thank you for asking for that. That's important clarification. I wonder, do we got a draft business case that I wonder if we could put on screen? It'd be helpful. The proposal is that we develop a soil deposit bylaw, or bylaw to regulate a soil deposit bylaw. That would also require a service establishment bylaw. And then we budget for one new full-time equivalent position to administer. That would be within the bylaw team, quite likely. And then there'd be a variety of other little expenses, like we have to outfit that person with gear, a laptop, a phone, those kinds of things. So there are those kinds of startup and equipment costs as well. If you would go to page 6 of this document, there's a table of costs. This is a draft business case that you've not had unfortunately had a benefit of seeing before the meeting tonight. But if we could zoom in on those costs, I think that will be helpful. Thank you. So this cost breakdown doesn't provide costs per electoral area, cost to taxpayers per electoral areas, but rather a total cost for the service. And I'm estimating, you see at the top of that table, there's a revenue line. I'm estimating soil deposit fees starting in year 1 at $20,000 and increasing until 2028 at about $75,000. So we've got an opportunity with a bylaw like this to establish a fee. I've estimated $1 per cubic meter of soil deposited, and I'm estimating about 75,000 cubic meters of soil deposited each year. We can come back to how I arrived at those numbers. But so there's an opportunity for some revenues. And my point is that those revenues would grow as we implement and gain compliance with the bylaw. On the expense side, these are the costs that are much easier to estimate. I'm anticipating costs in the first year of 118,000, and then they would escalate in year 2 to about 157 and stabilize at roughly 150,000 a year. And so when the program's more fully implemented, I'd expect to see about half of costs covered by fees and the other half by tax requisition. And so that would be the objective, is to have a service that costs about 150,000, roughly half of that fees and half tax requisition. Now, estimating revenues is incredibly difficult because we've got very poor data about what soil is being deposited. So there's a variety, and canvassed our neighboring jurisdictions, didn't get any useful data from them. So we just really had to assemble a list of sites that we're aware of and try to estimate how much of their total volumes would be deposited in a year. And frankly, that we use a little bit conservative estimates because we don't want to overestimate fee revenues, because then we're stuck in any given year with a revenue shortfall. So that's my estimate, is that we'd, under permit, we'd likely see somewhere around 75,000 cubic meters annually. And if we charge $1 a cubic meter, we'd raise 75,000.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Daniluz. Director McElhaney.
So I think that's interesting work. I just have a question on one of the expenses, travel. It just seems very, very low. I mean, because the nature of it would be a lot of travel to sites, I would imagine. And would it include a designated vehicle, and there would be that cost? And if not, the mileage would be more. I'm just wondering about the travel. The travel costs seem really low to me. Thank you.
Sure. No, I've assumed that we wouldn't procure a vehicle for this position, but rather we'd rely on pool vehicles and the vehicle that our bio enforcement team already uses. And so we pay for those vehicle costs largely through our operations support line item in the budget, rather than a special line item. And so this travel budget would cover a travel that's not covered, where we can't use a corporate pool vehicle. That's what this relatively small travel budget would cover.
Thank you, Director McElhaney, Director Davidson, and then Castle.
So looking at the slide, it says soil deposit regulation, 147,000. Is that, we're speaking to the cost to develop the regulation, or first year cost of having the regulation?
No, there are costs to develop the regulation, and so legal costs, for example, and that's included in the year one cost of $117,900. That cost is lower because I wouldn't anticipate hiring into that position until after the first quarter of 2025. We'd spend the first few months developing the bylaw, and we'd recruit once if the board decides to adopt the bylaw, then we'd recruit into the position. Of course, we'd have to define the position and so on. So there's a quarter of a year of salary savings, and that's ultimately why year one is a lower cost than subsequent years. But I have factored in legal costs in that first year of $10,000, and those legal costs in the first year are largely to support bylaw development. And then if you look across the legal line item there, it increases to $20,000 in 2026, and that would be to support enforcement actions and potentially a prosecution if we're serious about compliance and we want to send a message. At very least, we'd probably be looking for some legal support for compliance and enforcement, because this is the startup service, and like a new business, we have to fight for our market. If you see what I mean, we need to convince people to comply to something they're not used to complying, and I anticipate resistance, and so we'll need so the idea is that we'd have a legal budget to help get the bylaw compliance established.
So I think for myself, there's some unknowns you have to figure out in terms of what that bylaw actually looks like. And that in turn drives what the cost of having it would look like. I myself aren't that keen on having something that's really just there to generate revenue is the wrong phrase. I guess I'd restate it and say that what are the goals of the bylaw? And for me, the goals of the bylaw are basically to stop for-profit fill. Repurposing land for essentially what's an industrial use without an industrial zoning designation, and that's for-profit fill. So, the kind of classic soil deposit bylaw scenario where, everybody has to pay something anytime you're moving a load may not apply. I mean, it could be something that has high minimum fill requirements before it kicks in. And if you have a high minimum fill requirement, then in theory, the staff effort necessary to regulate it would be lower. So I think there's some variability there in terms of what actually goes into that bylaw, which in turn provides input to what the costs will be. That being said, I would say if any of the startup costs can be covered by grant funding, more than happy to allocate and spend on those activities.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. I just want to echo what Director Davidson said. If there is an opportunity to allocate grant funds for startup for this, and it helps to ensure that this gets passed, then I'm open to looking at that. I do want to just jump back into the presentation under proposed projects and initiatives for the service area. The soil deposit regulation is listed as high under the risk level. Can we just get a little bit of rationale about that high risk thinking?
Yes, certainly. That high risk rating is informed by what we've been seeing on the landscape over the last year and a half, and by the board's reaction to it. And so our board, if you recall, was considering a declaration of the state of emergency and characterizing a legal fill particularly as a crisis. And we have very strong concerns coming forward from EA directors and also community members that unregulated fill can cause environmental problems, increased flooding, decreased drainage, cause all kinds of conflicts in communities. So the opportunity for the board to meaningfully address soil deposit is through a soil removal bylaw. All of our other powers and authorities have very limited application, and we frankly won't find any success in attempting to use those to fundamentally regulate important aspects of soil deposit. And so if the board wants us to have a meaningful role in soil deposit and mitigating impacts from soil deposit, a soil deposit bylaw is the way to do it.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And just to follow up my final comments on that, it was suggested earlier that, the average resident, perhaps on the North Shore, if they were paying an extra 20 or $50 a year to ensure that this issue that we had some teeth on enforcing this, that it would probably be something palatable. And for Area G, we're looking at $7 this year. I know that area H is 15. But this is one of those other situations where there is a crisis in some areas. There are crises that have been averted in some areas that are all currently using a lot of our resources in terms of staff, time, and so I hope that we can look favorably on this and moving this forward. I believe that the actual meat of the bylaw, as Director Davidson has pointed out, is going to obviously shape some of this, how we go forward. But this gets us started on the work. It shows to our provincial partners that we're serious about this issue. It shows to our residents that we are listening and we are working to provide a level of service that they expect. And I hope that we can get support on this. Procedurally, when do we actually make a decision on option 1 or 2?
Through the chair to Director Castle, if this committee passes a motion to accept all of the protective service areas as presented or as amended, that would direct staff to bring forward the next stage of the budget inclusive of those changes or as presented. And that would be a full board discussion as the full budget package. So right now would be an ideal time to choose one of those options so that it would go forward as part of the full roll-up.
Okay, thank you, Director Castle. We've got Director Wardenberg hasn't spoken yet, and then.
Thank you. Just to clarify, the Costa Area C residents, did I hear correctly at $15.70? Sorry. My hearing's going. While you're figuring that, question through the chair, how does this bylaw apply to Crown lands? Doesn't apply to Crown lands as far as somebody setting up something on Crown lands as far as a dumping or a future gravel pit that might be looking at double hauling, or an existing gravel pit that would be looking at hauling in and out.
Somebody has.
Pardon me?
Okay, thank you. Through the chair to Director Wardenberg, I'll answer the first question. My notes are area C, the impact of including the option with the soil deposit was $9.62. Area D was the one at $15.70. But I'll turn the microphone over to my colleague Graham Danilous to answer the Crown Land question, if you don't mind, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
A soil bylaw, a soil deposit bylaw would apply to third-party users of Crown land, assuming that the bylaw is developed in that way. But it certainly can apply to third-party users. And so that means if a party has obtained a license to use Crown land, and a part of that use that they're licensed for is to deposit soil, then our bylaw would apply. It wouldn't apply to activities a lot of activities that occur on Crown land that are regulated by the province, like forestry activities and a variety of other kind of things that the province undertakes or fundamentally regulates through provincial acts.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly appreciate the sentiments behind the soil bylaw and the desire for this. But I really struggle with seeing it as a waste of taxpayers' dollars when whoever we hire to do the job is going to have really little or no effect, because the person really comes with no teeth. If our bylaw officer could only issue a ticket of $5,000, and the province can issue tickets of $100,000, and these haulers pay, or the companies pay the $100,000 fine and keep on hauling. I mean, you can't take their business license away because the next day they just go and change the name of their company, but they could impound their vehicles. The province could. If I'm speeding excessively, I get a ticket. Well, I haven't yet, but I would be ticketed, and then I could also have my vehicle impounded. And I think that that is really the only thing that's going to stop all of this illegal soil hauling and dumping. Because if they can afford $100,000, then $5,000 is just like, I mean, it's kind of a bad joke. So I don't know. I feel that we need to push back with the province and make them hire more people. If they don't have enough people to service the province, that's on them, and they should be stepping up. They keep downloading to local government and but not providing the funds, and so it keeps falling on the taxpayers. And so I'm not in favor of having our own bylaw officer for soil deposits. And like I say, I think that we really need to push back instead of bowing under. Thank you.
I probably have 3 questions, if I may. I'll start with one. Is this a kind of bylaw we can opt in or out of, like animal control? Not all areas pay for animal control.
Through the chair to Director Dixon, if I understand the question correctly, I believe that we have many bylaws that aren't applicable in all 8 electoral areas, but the bylaw enforcement service itself is EA-wide. So regardless of whether you are opting in or opting out, you would still be paying into the full service.
So maybe it now's up, but in animal control, is that not a bylaw? Not all electoral areas, I think, pay into animal control.
Through the chair to Director Dixon, it's not an EA-wide service. It's a sub-regional service essentially where you've opted into that service.
So could the soil bylaw be a sub-regional service?
It would be possible to structure a service and that applies to some electoral areas and not others. The challenge would arise is if we wanted to include a part of an electoral area into the service area. In that case, we'd be in the service establishment process, we'd be doing the referendum or the counter petition process, which is a lot more intensive and a much more difficult process. But of course, we could define a service area to include some EAs, not in others. The costs would remain, depending on the electoral area, the costs would remain largely as I've identified them, and that would just divide it between fewer partners.
Another one, if I may, thank you. The other, I'll admit it, at this very moment in time, you know, I'm kind of intrigued by the sub-regional. It's not as though I have no soil deposit in my area. It's just that it's ALR, and so there is an avenue for addressing that as far as I know. But is it possible, if as an electoral group we decided that we wanted our bylaw focusing 80% on the soil deposit over in area F and G right now, and not hire another person, but that's just what we make as a priority for our bylaw officers?
That's a difficult one. We have 2 bylaw officers currently, and we maintain a file load of between 400 and 450 active bylaw enforcement files at any one time. And I hear when we present to this group, we hear concerns about the time that bylaw files are taking to close. That's a very high file load for 2 officers already. And so adding in soil deposit files for our bylaw officers, they can be quite complex and technical, and I think that's a challenge to add it to them. Now, the fact that we are already engaged to some degree in this work partly offsets it, offsets those costs. We are already doing some of this work informally, which is, I think, a problem from my perspective because we have very weak powers and we're not very effective other than in a coordination role. But if that's something you'd like to explore further, we need to take some time to really understand it and understand what it means. But there would be bylaw development costs and other things to factor in as well.
Okay, thank you. And one more, I'm hogging the mic here, but this issue, it seems to me, began to be really noticeable when the province came up with this housing mandates, and there's a lot of construction going on. Is it possible to think that that will slow down, that at some point we're not going to have such a massive excavators digging out fill?
The fill crisis that we're seeing in the electoral areas over the last couple of years, it coincides with the province developing the housing statutes. But frankly, the development that will arise because of the changes that the housing statutes are brought on, that development is yet to come, I would suggest. So I think that the fill deposit we're seeing is a result of current development levels, often in Metro Vancouver, but in the lower mainland generally, and of the desire for haulers to find lower cost sites. So either to avoid the costs of formal structured soil receipt sites, or they're looking for low regulation jurisdictions where they think that they can do this kind of thing with a minimum of cost and regulation. But I don't think it's really connected to the housing statutes.
Thank you. Good.
Just yet.
Director Dixon, Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So similar to Director Dixon, Mr. Daniels, when you're speaking, I thought I heard you say something about a new service area, but I'm inferring that's I didn't hear correctly. You're just considering it now. I can see the advantages to that approach. It also allows would allow us the opportunity to change to a parcel tax mechanism, for example, if that made better sense. So yeah, certainly looking for something on this. I'm not sure what my point is. Yeah, anyway, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Davidson, Director McMahon.
So if I remember correctly, and I don't remember really clearly, I believe the province said when they were approached that we needed to take the first steps on this. And that's and refresh my memory if I'm not correct, but that for them to do something, they wanted to see us at least take some steps. And that was sort of how we kind of stepped forward to do this. And I believe I may have an issue in my area right now that I've got to explore further that would definitely fill the bill for needing a soil deposit bylaw officer right now. And it's just that, you know, I know it's very difficult. We're all stretched and I don't know. I mean, when I really hear what Director Johnson said, but I also hear things like we do not have enough boots on the ground for our conservation service, for the NRO. I mean, some of the stuff, I mean, I've been on looking at things coming up today in my community that we do not, you know, so although it is true the province should, but everyone is stretched and there are no easy answers, but like this does have real effects on our environment and the community safety. So I don't know. At first I personally I was like, oh, another one, we can't really afford it, but I don't know how we're going to move forward and protect our communities against this. And it is the tip of the iceberg for development where, you know, everybody's getting going to be pushed. So I don't know, keeping our costs as low as we can and dealing with it. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking we're probably going to have this so that the province will take us seriously. And then we're looking at factors like 2026 budget's going to be higher. So where do we go from there? So, you know, I just all of these different factors, but, you know, and maybe you can, Mr. Daniels, you can, you know, kind of weigh in on, or Director Castle on the province did say something that we needed to take the first steps. And if we can do that, but this would be something we can put in our advocacy committee too, to really push hard on the province to come forward and get some more boots on the ground and help us with this situation. So thank you.
Thank you, Director McMahon. I believe Director Donald hasn't spoken yet.
Oh, well, here we go. Thanks, Chair Dickey. What is the value of the land that can get destroyed from this? I'm looking at how much effort and work is going into by the limited staffing that we have just on one particular incident that I've been going through for the last 3 weeks. The amount of time is extraordinary. The recovery of that land, it could be lost forever if this contaminated soil dumping continues without any enforceability or anything like that. So I think the more people we have involved in this, the better off. Do we need to get the provincial government to be on the same page as us? They've said that they would be, providing we were willing to work with them, but to get this started. So I believe we do need to get this started. We've been talking about it for a long time, and yet really there's been an increase in activity in Area B alone in the last 9 months. So we need to move faster on this and just show our seriousness in taking on this project. And I recognize that other areas are not on the same page with this particular issue, but I really believe it's something important for Area B specifically and for other areas that have been going through this, and that we need to continue to move forward with this program. And I'm supporting this.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair to staff. Just clarification as far as the ability, the $100,000 fine that was referred to today, is that just, in relation to dumping on AL agricultural land, or land in the agricultural land reserve?
Through the chair. The Agricultural Land Commission and the province through the natural resource officers, they both have similar powers and that they can levy administrative penalties up to 100,000 or so. There's a process that they have to go through, but it's not only the ALR, not only the ALC that has that ability. It's the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Forest too, as they enforce, say, the Water Sustainability Act, where fill is placed in and about a stream.
A certain water course, but so if the land is not, or if it's being filled and it's not affecting any environment, or doesn't prove to have environmental hazard, then there's nothing we can do.
The province comes into play on soil deposit issues if it's in the agricultural land reserve, or if the fill is being placed in and about a stream and it violates the Water Sustainability Act, or if the soil being placed is contaminated soils. And so it's those three scenarios where the province has a very, has a robust role to play and strong regulations and enforcement capabilities. And I'd suggest to you that if the strategy, which I think is a reasonable strategy, but if the strategy is to rely on the province, we should understand that there will be fill operations that are not in the ALR, that don't involve fill in and about a stream, and that are not using contaminated soils to fill, and in which case the province would have a next to no role in them, unless there's some kind of occurrence of species at risk or some unusual feature, archaeology or something like that. But generally speaking, it's those three areas that the province has a robust role in.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one other thing, just want to weigh in. Yeah, we're spending a lot of time already on this with the bylaw officer. I support this going forward with this bylaw because we are spending the time already. We're spending the money, and that's taking away from the other enforcement opportunities from other bylaws that we need to enforce as well. So that's my reasoning. I would support this as soon as Mr. Castle brings it forward.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. Just to circle back to comments Director Michael Honig made. Yeah, we've had representatives from the Ministry of Agriculture and the ALC in this room telling us that unless we come to the plate with this, they've exhausted what they're able to do. I've had phone calls, personal phone calls from the former Minister of Agriculture imploring that we move forward with this. And I don't believe that it's a download. I believe it's we need you to have some tools in your toolkit. We all need to come to the project together with everything we have available. And those comments from the ALC is because in order to really get a handle on this as an issue provincially, as a BC-wide problem, as Director Davidson's been saying for the last year, we're chasing them out of the ALR areas, and now they're ending up in the non-ALR areas, the unregulated areas. We've got applications before us right now where there's up to 5 acres that's being proposed with like 12 feet of fill, and there are no regulations around that. Nothing. And anybody who thinks that that's okay, I don't. We're completely changing the topography of our neighborhoods and the impact that that's having on the neighborhood and on the other residents in the area. It's just not right. Want to circle back to the comments made about enforcement. So I heard the comment made that even though the bylaw may not be applicable in all areas, bylaw enforcement is an EA-wide service. So if there's an animal control enforcement issue the bylaw officer that's addressing that is being paid for out of an EA-wide service. That's not correct?
Through the chair, Director Castle, animal control is not run out of the bylaw enforcement office. We have a separate animal control service. So those officers are paid through animal control. They're not bylaw officers through bylaw enforcement.
So in considering this as a sub-regional, we're like considering one person in their own kind of department enforcing soil deposit bylaws in certain areas and not in other areas.
I'll start, and then I think Mr. Daniluz would like to comment. But one thing that would be important to note, I'm not entirely certain that you could proceed in 2025 with a sub-regional service that has yet to be established and tax for it. So the way to do this in 2025 would be through an existing service area, which is bylaw enforcement and EA-wide service. But perhaps Mr. Daniluz wants to speak a little bit about the efficiency of additional components of bylaw enforcement within the one service area.
There are two possible approaches. The first one is that soil deposit is a part of our existing bylaw enforcement service, and we budget for it through the bylaw enforcement budget, and that's the track we're on. If for good reasons, but one of them is that simply we don't have a soil deposit service to prepare budgets for, estimate costs within. So for that reason, we're focused at the moment on our existing bylaw enforcement service. As Ms. Kinnaman said, if we're to establish a new service area, which is the second possibility, that would take some time and we wouldn't have an opportunity to tax in 2025 for it. But I'd suggest maybe we can tax within the bylaw enforcement budget for the bylaw development and other aspects. It's a question. So option one, we run it through the bylaw enforcement service area. Option two, establish a standalone service area that could include some electoral areas and not others. But that doesn't mean we have to budget for it separately from bylaw enforcement necessarily. As far as I know, I have to get advice from our accountants. But it wouldn't be, we would integrate operationally with our bylaw enforcement department. And so the way a staff person's experiences or the way somebody in the public experiences, it wouldn't be an isolated department of one, the soil deposit department. It would be somebody within our bylaw team and well integrated within our departmental operations.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. And just to finalize my thoughts on this, you know, it's been stated a couple of times the amount of resources that we're already using. And I know that there are instances where EA directors have really called on FERD staff to assist, even in those instances where it's ALC. I know that there are EA directors who have insisted that FERD staff support enforcement efforts without a bylaw. And I just really hope that if this doesn't go through, or if there are areas that opt out of it, that when the day comes that there is an issue in your area, and it will happen, it has happened, that you do not expect service, and that you can tell your residents to push back on the province, to phone your MLA for service. If that's the route that we're going, I can accept that, as long as we can all accept that when I almost said a bad word, when something happens in our area and we have residents who are demanding service, and we're the first person they call in their high emotion, that we can stand up and say, you just need to push back to the province, call your MLA. That's the reality of it.
Through staff, I think, is there any because I'll admit, it's almost a $16 increase for Area H. And are there opportunities to use Community Works Fund for any of this to soften some of the taxation, even if it's for year one?
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Dixon. We don't think so. Typically, the community works funds are for new items and capital items. So, yeah, they have relaxed the requirements regarding feasibility studies and things like that, but I don't think any of that applies here.
Director Dixon, Director David.
Thank you, Chair. So we talked a bit about sub-regional, and it does provide an equitable approach. Challenge, as Ms. Kinnaman points out, is one of timing. Time is of the essence on this one, is all I can say. So it could well be that in the coming year that, you know, we can get the soil deposit bylaw in place. Maybe at that time we can pull back and start considering transferring to a sub-regional service area if it makes better sense. I would put it out there that that's if you know, I can understand Director Johnson's concerns to her point on enforcement. The reality is, even with with the tools that the province has today, in my area, we still rely on community vigilance is the by far the best enforcement tool we have. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon. I think there's some legislative changes that are needed that empower both the province and us, but that's going to be a separate advocacy track. So in the meantime, what do we do? I think we need to move forward. And if it looks like that, for example, to Director Johnson, if it's just striking as being a cost with no benefit, you know, I'd certainly looking at your tax hit and reallocating some of my funding to your area if that would help soften the blow. Just to be able to move this forward, because time is absolutely of the essence on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Davidson. Just a question along this timing line. It seems to me that this project has got some parallels with our aggregate industry in the past. And as I remember, our commercial aggregate bylaw went to the ministry and sat there for 3 years spinning its wheels. Am I wrong about that, Mr. Daniels?
No, Director Dickey, not at all. And that, if I may dig into that a little bit, the commercial gravel operation bylaw draws on the same sections of the Local Government Act that allows for soil removal and deposit bylaws. There's an opportunity to pass a soil deposit bylaw, and for that matter, soil removal bylaw that doesn't need provincial approvals. We just have to avoid certain topics. And so in our commercial gravel operation bylaw, because we prohibit commercial gravel ops in some areas, and because we establish a fee, a volumetric fee that engaged the concurrent authority section of the community charter and requires the minister's approval. And that was very hard to get the minister's approval. It took ages. We could structure a soil deposit bylaw that avoids the need for a provincial approval if we stay away from references to contaminated soils. If we're going to regulate the deposit of contaminated soils, that's a concurrent authority with the province. They occupy the field, so to speak, the regulatory field for contaminated soils. If we wish to do that, then it needs ministerial approval. But if we can avoid directly regulating contaminated soils, then we can avoid, I think we can avoid provincial approval.
So you spoke of royalties. We are talking about some kind of a royalty here.
Yes, it's perhaps a quirk of the Local Government Act in that if you want to establish not a royalty but a fee, rather, they're different, and I want to be clear, it's a fee. If you're establishing a volumetric fee like 20 cents per cubic meter of gravel removed from a property, that requires provincial approval from the province. If you're establishing a soil deposit fee, say what I'm suggesting, $1 per cubic meter of soil deposited, that doesn't generate the need for ministerial approval.
Okay, good. Thank you. And the other issue that I might think of is this type of a enforcement regulation could involve sizable legal fee part, I'm guessing.
I'm some of that as if indeed we go in this direction, if that's your wish. What I've estimated in the 5-year plan that we would need about $10,000 in year 1 to help develop the bylaw, and then $20,000 in year 2, and that 20,000 would be oriented to compliance and enforcement. And in year 3 and subsequent years, I've estimated a much lower amount of legal costs. Roughly $5,000 and $3,000 in subsequent years. And that would be more of a steady state in my mind. But that money could increase if it's the will of the board to conduct prosecutions of the bylaw. So one of the ways we can step up our bylaw enforcement is we can go through the courts and seek injunctions and prosecute our bylaw. We do that relatively seldom in our normal bylaw enforcement operations. We're doing it right now, aside in Laidlaw. But if that's the will of the board and the board wants to be aggressive and really use its teeth with respect to enforcement, then yes, it could involve higher costs in subsequent years than what I've estimated in the table I showed. But that would be a choice that you make.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Director Castle.
And I think that we're ready to make that choice. So I think it's a motion to accept the financial plans as presented, including option 1.
Through the chair to Director Castle, I guess my suggestion would be specific to 207 budget, because I'm not sure that we've separated out others in this category. So yes, if you wanted to make a motion to accept budget 207 with option 1 included, you could make that motion.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Director Castle. Second, Director Davidson. Discussion, Director Dixon.
Thank you. I wasn't quite ready, but that's okay. Same budget. Budget 207, because I can't find it in my package. This is a desperate attempt. Is there any opportunity to use, is there any surplus in that budget that could be used to soften the $147,000 requisition? Or has it been taken care of already?
Yes, there's some surplus. At the end of this year, we expect $226,000 in surplus. We're drawing that in over the 5 years and we'll deplete it down. This was option 1 to about 141,000, which isn't a bad place, an amount to keep in surplus for a service like this. But we could be a little bit more aggressive and offset some of those costs through our surplus savings. I would just caution anytime we're relying on savings to fund operations. That's like, in your household, if you're using your savings to buy your groceries, that only lasts for so long. And then we get the shock of having to fund it all through taxes. But I do think we could be slightly more aggressive and offset, I think, a relatively small amount of those soil deposit bylaw costs from surplus. But I think we wouldn't want to bring our surplus really, I think, in my mind, below about $100,000 or $120,000. So we could soften the amount by, say, $20,000 over the 5-year financial plan. That would be an improvement.
Thank you. No, I understand that, but it was just if there was a way to bring even a little bit, I would appreciate that.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Further discussion? See no one interested. All those in favor? The contrary? Motion carries.
So
Ms. Kinnaman.
Sure. So yeah, Chair Dickey, in that section under the protective services part B, were there other budgets that you wanted to separate for discussion? Perhaps we'll just give Beth a moment to bring those back up on screen.
Director Johnson.
Just a quick reminder, I'm sure that staff hasn't forgotten that Area A would like to opt in for the animal control. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Yeah, so in 2025, we will do an analysis of the cost of Area A joining the program. If we feel that there's any cost to the service area, can our current fleet and officers handle any inquiries that even though I'm sure there will be few. So we have to do that analysis. And then to get a good picture of how much it might cost, although I'm sure there will be an increase in 2026, you could see the cost that is provided per, I guess, average assessment for other electoral areas here, just to give you an idea for now. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Johnson. It appears that we have met everybody's needs.
Okay, so maybe we'll just go to the slide with the resolution.
Okay, looking for motion.
Yeah, so in this case, again, it would be budgets as amended, since we did make a change to the bylaw enforcement budget.
Okay. Director Wardmer moves such a motion. Second, Director McElhonick. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor. Contrary, motion carries.
Okay, so our next section is the transportation services section. This includes transit, the Lake Erie train whistle cessation, and street lighting. We can go to any service area that you would like to.
Any discussion, directors? Seems like all are happy. Satisfied? Do we have a motion? Move Director Johnson. No need for any amendments, I'm guessing. Seconder, Director Wardenberg, and discussion, hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Okay, next is the environmental health services. So this service or this category includes drainage, garbage services, and flood mitigation.
Okay. Any budgets that people would like to address? It appears not. Director Wardenberg's looking interested. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my notes just on the Area C garbage, 410, I think it is. On the contract services for Area C for the Harrison Mills, transfer station, how often are they, do they come up for tender for the service there?
That's a great question. That contract is actually set to expire this February, so it will be issued for RFP very shortly. It's typically a 3-year contract with an option for a mutual 2-year extension.
Okay, good. Just as far as advertising that, how do you advertise that position?
Normally we post contract opportunities like this on the FRD website, on sites like BC Bid, but we also are making an effort to use local bulletin boards. We'll basically talk with the local community and figure out the best way to engage and make sure we can find or generate as much local interest as possible, because I'm sure a lot of folks aren't browsing BC Bid for these types of opportunities.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Director Dom.
Thanks very much, Chair Dickey. Just through staff regarding garbage within Area B and wanting to ensure that we're continuing to work on getting the majority of the Sunshine Valley, for example, to be contributing. And then I would like to know where we stand on the curbside collection in the Yale Dogwood Valley area on anything that would be taking place there with some of the challenges that we had. Are we still continuing to work on that through this budget, or is there something required additionally above that. Does that make sense?
This contract or this budget as presented sees the current Area B curbside contract through to the end of its term.
Other question, Director Donald?
Yeah, so the other area was related to the Sunshine Valley and the massive growth that's occurred where we're not recouping from the new number, the higher volume number of users with no way of knowing that. Is there a plan in place to have that included into the next budget? So that we're not essentially operating at a loss from our previous agreement.
I think this is something that we'll have to discuss a little bit further and get back to you on.
Good. Thank you, Director Damo. Not seeing any other concerns. Do we have a motion that we'd like to make? Here we go. Move Director Dixon, second Director Castle, discussion, hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Okay, our next section is the environmental development. This is for the electoral area planning and the commercial gravel operations. So the commercial gravel operations does not have a tax impact.
Okay, so was there anything here that directors would like to address? Director Dixon.
Looking on this, I see in 2026, 27, there's two Cultus Lake zoning bylaw updates. I'm just not sure why there's two and what we're thinking there. Thank you.
I mean, through the chair, I could address that question. The concept is that we would phase the work over 2 years.
Will it have any impact on what they do with their village center renewal, or is this just updating the existing bylaw?
Yeah, the project's listed there, and it's subject to obtaining grant funds to do the work. It's there not because of it's there because when we last opened up the zoning bylaw in the Cultus Lake community, there was a lot of concerns about the calculation of heights and a variety of other issues. And so that project was really motivated by those experiences, and it's not reflective of the park board's current intention around the village area. Please.
Good, thank you, Director Dixon. And the housing statutes implementation, what kind of work does that involve, Mr. Downs?
That involves implementing the changes the province adopted earlier this year. As you'll know, we got an extension to the end of 2025 to amend our zoning bylaw to allow either an accessory dwelling unit like a carriage house or a secondary suite in all residential zones. The board approved a work plan for us to get to that zoning amendment, and it involves looking at our current services where we have water and sewer systems and understanding the capacity to support those additional dwelling units. It involves communicating with private utilities to inform them of the new requirement and hear their feedback about their capacity to support new additional demand. And it would also look at groundwater and environmental concerns in areas where we have particularly in areas where we have small lot development that relies on individual on-site septic fields. And so if you think of parts of Hatzic Prairie and Hatzic Island and Lake Eric, and where we don't have any community sanitary sewer system, but people are building and intensifying development on very small lots. And so what would it mean to add suites in those areas? That's another thing that would be looked at. So the province gave us a grant of $204,000, and we're proposing to use that money to complete that work and then ultimately update our zoning bylaw to allow suites and ADUs across the board.
Good, thank you, Mr. Downes. Okay, don't see any other concerns. And this is, Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, just on that, commercial gravel operations. I guess it's a concern more than anything as far as revenue goes, but I think I've said this before, but I'll repeat it. My concern is for that Woodbrook aggregates on the Lloyd Highway. And the massive expansion that they're going through for pretty much commercial, I would call it, a processing situation where they're taking the aggregates from the pit up on Chehalis Forest Service Road and processing them at that pit, either crushing, I don't know what they're doing there, but they have a whole lot of equipment there. And it seems to be all the trucks are coming from the Chehalis Forest Road pit and the gravel is being processed less of a gravel mining and more of an industrial processing facility. That's what I'd call it. And if we can increase our surplus on this, I would have staff look into it, or I would ask that you look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wardenberg. So the Chehalis pit, is that within our commercial aggregate area or?
It is, Chair. It's up the Chehalis Forest Service Road, but it is subject to our bylaw, and they do pay a volumetric fee to us. Yeah, one wrinkle that you might be interested in is that the commercial gravel operations bylaw sets out community areas, which are I think it's evident what those might be, and it establishes the 20 cent a cubic meter fee in those areas. And if you're outside a community area like the Statlu pit is, it's 15 cents a cubic meter, and that presumes less community impact. But clearly, if the material is being extracted from the Statlu pit and brought into a community area for processing, then we're experiencing the impacts where residents live. So I think we're not quite achieving the intent of our bylaw there, if that's the case.
Okay, good. Yep, thank you. That seems to have met everyone's concerns here. And there is the motion that we would be looking towards. Move Director Johnson, second Director Makahonic. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary motion carries.
So the next section is our recreation and culture section. So we have a variety of recreation and culture here. So we have community parks, the North Bend Boston Television, Community Use Facility, Heritage Conservation, the Alma Carlson Pool, Bowling Alley, and the Regional Library.
Good. Anybody like to pull one of those budgets? Director Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a question with the bowling alley. Where do we see the actual income from those using the bowling alley?
To the Chair, to Director Johnson, we don't actually see that revenue on this budget. The Bowling Association, they have their own operating budget, and the grant that we provide to them basically makes up the balance, what their income does not provide.
Okay. Thank you, Director Johnson. Any further? Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, on the Morris Valley Sewer Service Area 444. A couple questions to staff. As far as the
Director Wardenberg, we're actually not on that section yet. We're just on recreation and culture at this time. No worries.
Sorry.
Director Johnson.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Johnson. See, Director Davis.
So the Elmer Carlson Pool, I just have a request for staff. I would like staff to update the draft 2025 budget for the Elmer Carlson pool to reduce the tax impact in 2025 to only 5% through the use of appropriated surplus and a decreased contribution to reserves, please.
Yes. Thank you, Director Johnson.
Thank
Note
you.
that.
Okay, staff's taking that direction.
Okay.
No comments from staff on that issue? No? Okay, thank you. Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, need the staff over there probably to help me out with this one. When I look at this for 725 for the trail, the 75,000 is going to be moved to 2026. And my numbers for the post and rail I thought were $40,000. This from my community works fund. And the trail resurfacing was 60,000. So
Yes, through the chair to Director Dixon. Director Dixon and I have, with Christina, have been having conversations around utilizing community works funds to offset taxation in the 725 budget. And what Director Dixon is proposing is to increase the amounts shown here in the 2028 to the post and rail to 40,000. And then in 2029 to the trail resurfacings to 60,000. Correct.
as well as I'll be allocating some community funds to possibly build a last little section of the trail.
And further, you've spoken about reducing taxation.
Yes.
And that can be done through looking at the community works funds and also VCCs to offset some maintenance costs. And we can provide those details that we shared with you to reflect the budget as you so choose.
Okay, thank you. So this one would have to be as amended. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Director McElhaney.
Looking at 723. And 2025. This member tax requisition is 1575. I'm just looking at last year, and sorry, we looked at so we have the CRV sign replacement coming out of the ground, but oh, that's community works funding. So, but then we had staffing last year that attended the Vetter River cleanup fund, and we actually took that, or the Vetter Rivers Day. We actually took funding out of the cleanup fund because is this the same budget that would cover that, but we're using tax money this year? I think.
Through the chair to Director Magahonic, we're just can you please clarify your question? I think you're talking about the $200,000 grant. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and we took some of the funding for the park staff attendance and parks work out of the grant fund, I believe, last year because it fit the criteria. Are we doing any of that this year? Because I would support that. And where would it come out of here? Would it be?
Typically, staff time assigned to this park is done through the regional budget.
Traditionally.
Okay.
And I believe last year we did some of the staffing. We took a piece of it out of it was my recollection.
As a recovery?
Yes, out of the grant because it was related to cleanup. and it fit within the criteria that, so we took some out of there as well. Would there be any room to do that in here?
Through the chair to Director McElhonick, we're not seeing that as recorded on our records for that grant. So I think we'd have to look back at that and get back to you. Yeah, and traditionally we wouldn't be drawing on a grant for the regular staff time, but we could clarify that piece.
And I think it was for attending, events on weekends, like coming out to that. And I had approved it, but then I never seen anything really happen with that. Is that something we can make an amendment to after, kind of have a look at, or do we need to look at this a little more? Or?
We can, I'll talk to Christina Vagdeveen to see if she noted that allocation for staff, and maybe we're just not aware of that, and we can follow up with you on that.
It's not, thank you, through step, through the chair, it's not, it wasn't a huge amount, but it was some, because there is expenses for staff to come out on weekends to do that kind of work, and that really is in the spirit of the criteria for the cleanup fund. So if we could do that and allocate it when it makes sense, I think that would make sense.
We can certainly consider that moving forward and understand if that is meets the requirements of that grant.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director McElhonick. I think I've got Director Adamo and then Wardenberg. Is that okay?
Thanks, Chair Dickey. Just with respect to Service Area 717. Just wanted to make note that both Director Johnson and myself had opted for reduced heritage grants scenario number 1. If that was on the record, did we do that? We did. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You, Director Adamo. Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, I guess I should weigh in on Area C Parks as far as the allocation of the community works funds. I believe I have a little bit of room there left, and I guess it would be about $188,000 to allocate yet. Since the fire department doesn't need the money, or I'm not going to allocate it at this point in time, I would take direction from staff, or they know what I want, I think, as far as the $100,000 going to the extended path and the shelter on Morris Valley Road. And I would say the other $88,000 to be allocated to the Lake Yurok shelter. And that should do it. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. That seems to have brought concerns to a close. We have a number of amendments.
I think I'd just look to our team here to clarify specifically with Area E community parks if it's a desire for us to not move forward yet on that budget until you've got that clarification, or if you're comfortable with it as presented. If we've got the opportunity to make that change, we will, but otherwise we would want to separate that one out and not make a decision on it here today in terms of moving forward.
So Director McElhonick, you would prefer to hold off and allow it to be changed as it evolves?
Yeah, if we want to pull that out, and as long as we can get it done by the end of the year, to have a look and see. Because I believe that was done last year. Maybe we approved it. It never happened. I don't know.
Through the chair to Director McElhonick, it wouldn't come forward until January's ESC. We would have to bring some of these items that haven't been decided on to a future meeting. There's no particular need to have it done by year end, but just in terms of the roll up of the budget and moving forward to the next process, if it's dependent on that information, we should separate that one out from the motion and defer that budget until the January ESC.
Okay, good. Got a plan. So the motion before us is.
Sorry, Mr. Director Dickey, if I could, I just want to confirm that that the staff over there are happy with whatever Beth is doing over there that to adjust the park budget is.
Yeah, as staff and assisting with parks, Beth and I tend to be on the same page, so I'm happy. Yes, thank you for checking. Yeah.
There was some discussion. There was a budget that we had overlooked that had an option. So Beth's just going to call that up. So that was part of our discussion that was on the side. So pardon me, but we're just going to skip back so that we have ultimate clarity from the committee. Thank you.
And the budget you're looking for is Boston Bar Fire. Yeah, Director Johnson, that's where you had indicated that you wanted to direct staff to pursue the option 1 with fire
Option 1.
underwriters.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so we'll go back to the motion for recreation and culture and look for a motion on those budgets as amended, with the exception of budget number 723, which will be deferred until January's EASC.
Okay. Motion, Director Adamo, second Director Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Okay, so our next section is our utilities section. So it's split between sewer and water. So starting with sewer, we have all of our sewer systems on the list here. So Cultus, Lake, North Bend, Morris Valley, Baker Trails, Popcom, and South Cultus.
Okay, any discussion? Director Dixon?
448, again, just I have been speaking with the engineering staff and do plan to allocate funds from community work to this. I don't know if that needs to be in here or not. On my little piece of paper, I've written down $100,000. This one we're waiting for prices, I think, so.
So noted 100,000 for this 448. Community works.
Okay, Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, through the chair to staff, a couple questions on service area for the Morris Valley sewer system. As far as the infiltration issues and the transfer of funds from the moving the funds from fixing the field to addressing the causes of the problem, you might say. Now it involves a collection system that is underneath the property of the stratas. So I'm just looking for some indication how you're going to address that. Like, who's going to do the work? Are you working with the stratas? Are you going to do the work under strata property? I'm just looking for a little bit of more information.
Through the chair to Director Wardenberg, those details we'd still need to sort out. Our previous approach with the stratas was basically to, provide them some high level advice on where we suspected the issues were originating from and putting them in contact with some contractors who we thought could assist them with the issue. The efforts that have been made so far have been unsuccessful. And so the thought with this ask was that as these strata subdivisions are essentially the service area anyway, so it's the same folks paying to fix the problem, whether it's via their strata fees or via the FVRD. we thought it prudent for us to take more of a leadership role in addressing the problem and seeing that it's corrected properly. So not entirely sure whether, how that would work, but right now the ask is just for the funding to support that initiative.
I would support that 100%. You're correct. It's more or less part of our system anyway. So fixing it with our dime or taxing it is the same anyway. So I appreciate that. I had one question as far as the user fees go on the budget. Got $15.11. My calculation is very simple math. And I calculated about 2188, and just the increase divided by the 233 lots, because each lot would pay. It would be in your strata fees. Is that how that works?
Through the chair, there's through the chair to Director Wardenberg, the nuance to that calculation is it's the number of occupied lots. Okay. So it's not the number of total lots. So it changes every year, obviously, as homes are constructed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Director McElhaney.
Service area 446, through the chair. So looking at the line item debt expense, I believe the debt is retired or very close to being retired.
Through the chair to Director McElhaney, no, the debt for this particular service area it expires in, I believe, either 2038 or 2039.
Okay, so this is a different one than we were talking about before.
That's correct.
Okay.
The discussion earlier was about the 250 service area.
Okay, 2038 and 20, sorry about that. Okay, 2038, 2039. So that's right across. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director McElhaney. Just quickly, our sewer system, service area 447. I'm just looking at the replacement value of $3.5 million, contribution of 90,000 per year to savings, potential cost of large scale failure 25,000. So if a large scale failure costs 25,000, why do we put 90,000 into savings every year?
Through the chair to Director Dickey. There's some nuance to that. This is, we'll say, a large scale failure in the context of a brand new system. So, we're not expecting any like structural failures at this point, given that it's only a few years old. We're talking, pumps and stuff like that.
So these systems, do they have disasters that befall them once in a while? Like, does a disposal field need to be replaced, or the mechanics of it? Or
I would suggest that the disposal system for this for the Popcom sewer system is not dissimilar to the one that we just replaced for Director Wardenberg's system out in Morris Valley.
So they or they possibly could have problems.
They do fail over time.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, thank you. This is in regard to the service area 493, Lake Yurok water system. I just want to clarify. So most of the tax increase here is for the increase on debt, if refinancing the debt on that long-term loan. And when is that debt mature?
To the chair to Director Wardenberg, can you just repeat which service area you're?
It's 493.
493. Thank you.
We're on the sewer systems right now, aren't we?
Oh, are we?
Yeah.
Oops.
We'll get there.
Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. Any other further questions, concerns? Not seeing any. We look for a motion. There we go. Any motions? Move Director Dixon, second Director Davidson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Okay, so the last section that we have today is our utilities water. So all the all the water systems are listed here. Just one note that we have had to make an update to one of the areas since publishing. So the Hatsit capital construction, this debt is coming due for new interest rate in 2025. So we've done an estimate based on MFA's indicative rate right now. So we are expecting an increase in 2025. So previously the tax requisition would have been just under $5,000. It'll increase to, we're estimating $5,800 for 2025. So that debt right now is 1.9% interest. The indicative rate is around, it's just over 3%.
Director Davidson.
So thanks for flagging this. I've been going under the assumption that this rate would stay flat for the basically 10 years, I thought. So I guess it comes down to when was the money initially borrowed and what was the first what do we call it, time span for that first borrow?
Yeah, so it varies, depends on MFA, on how long they lock it in. I believe this one was 5 years when it first was taken out. Some are 10, some are 5, depends on the timing that they take out the debt.
Okay. No, I know I'm going to get some unhappy customers on this one. That's a pretty substantial spike. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Davidson. Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, just on top of the other question, if I can remember it, the debt maturity. But on top of that, you identify the chlorination, and it's not chlorinated right now, but it may be chlorinated in the future. I'm just wondering if you have any idea of costs or how that would affect the budget, and what's the risk of that, or in your opinion?
Through the chair to Director Wardenberg. The notes in the presentation about chlorination, that's something that we've added to all the slide decks for our unchlorinated systems. In our discussions with Fraser Health, they have indicated that it is their intention to see all of our water systems, or all water systems, chlorinated in time. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Typically, the trigger has been large upgrades or additions to the system. So in the case of like the Lake Arrock water system, I would suggest that something like the redevelopment of the gravel site would likely trigger the system to require chlorination. In a situation like that, we would ask for the developer to cover the capital costs of those upgrades. Operationally, it's not a significant cost, a couple $1,000s a year in chemicals, and the pump skids aren't particularly costly.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Director Donald.
Thanks very much, Chair Dickey. Same or similar question with respect to the Yale water system. It says that Fraser Health may mandate chlorination where they currently don't have that. And however, I do have it in the Dogwood Valley water system. And my residents in the Dogwood Valley system have all had to install a water softening or water filtration system to make the water palatable. Is that something that Fraser Health covers, or is there a grant program available for something like that in the future that we can look into to try to offset some of the costs? So if they're forcing us, if the mandate is to put in chlorination, and yet after chlorination, the water system is not particularly drinkable from odors to taste, and they have to put in their own filtering system, is there something that we do about that, or is that all at the cost of the resident who didn't want this in the first place? That's the question that's coming up through our ratepayers meetings. This may not be the appropriate place for it, but something for future reference.
Through the chair to Director Damo, I'm not aware of any grants available for that particular issue, but we can have further discussion offline about kind of our experiences in other areas.
Good. Thank you, Director Damo. Director Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I know I've asked this question before, and I mean, I understand, so for the North Bend Water, that's 484. So I don't quite understand why people are paying the member tax requisition and a parcel tax. Shouldn't it be one or the other? How is it that it's both?
Yeah, through the chair to Director Johnson, it is one or the other. So in this service area, we have two separate sections of North Bend. So the parcel tax is for the Hallex area only.
Oh,
And
okay.
the requisition is for that separate section, and it's mostly CP properties.
Okay, I understand that now. All right, thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Johnson. Any further discussion? So we need a motion. Okay, we don't have any amendments, I don't think. So the motion as it's presented, move Director Damo.
Actually, Chair, it would be as presented because there was that change on the Hatsit capital.
Okay,
So it would be as amended.
as amended then. Thank you, Director Damo moves. Second, Director Makahonic, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
With that, that concludes all of the financial presentations for each of the electoral area wide budgets. We're happy to go through your financial summaries, answer any questions, or we're happy to adjourn as well. We'll leave it to you, Chair Dickey.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lounsborough. Directors, is there anything you would like to see discussed further on these topics? Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly before we wrap up, thank you so much for all the work that's gone into today and your patience with all of our questions. Certainly much appreciated. I just really want to confirm that what I think is happening with my Community Works Fund is happening. I can do that offline. I don't have a problem. I'm just not sure. Who's the best person to connect with?
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can follow up with a final snapshot of what that looks like when David and I connect. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. So, thanks are certainly in order for a very smooth session to staff. You've done a lot of background work in getting us to this day, so much appreciated. Not easy subjects for us to entertain. And certainly would like to thank all the electoral area directors for the very civil discourse that we've seen today. And I'm once again very impressed with the capabilities of all the people sitting here. So thank you, Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you. So just looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion moved, Director Damo, second, Director Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary? Motion carries.